Welcome to Fantasy Femme Fatales, where two fantasy readers dive headfirst into the worlds of romantasy and dark romance. From fantasy deep dives to book club banter, we're talking plot, magic systems, and all the spicy details. So pour a drink, grab your latest obsession, and let's turn the page together.
We're so excited to dive back into the back half of part 2, Anathema. We have new mics tonight, super exciting. Full disclosure, we are trying to up our game, hoping to sound better. So if we sound a little bit different than the last episode, that's why, but we really hope it improves your listening experience. Last week, we got the final word from our blessed mother, Keri Lake, and she has confirmed that the Eatingwood series, aka Anathema, will be a trilogy. Not a duology, a trilogy. And so to all of you listeners, you should feel so good about investing this time because it is going to pay off. And our girl Kara just got herself a beautiful hardcover copy of our book. Oh my gosh. We will cradle it in every episode and hold it dear. Okay, in our last episode, we covered the first half of part 2, and it was a doozy. Oh my god, it was huge. We're going to end at the beginning of part 3, so no spoilers beyond that point. We're hoping that next episode we can cover all of part 3, but full transparency, we haven't read it yet, so we don't know what we're in store for. Where we left last, Maevyth and Zevander were bonding over training class. Things are heating up, literally, with these two. Maevyth got beckoned down to the spider dungeon and made a new friend, Branimir. And we got a whole lot of lore from the magic Corvicae book that she's been given. And we ended with Zevander finally convincing Maevyth to sleep in his mother's old room. So, sexy, maybe, maybe not. I don't know.
Weird, sexy.
Weird, sexy, new setting for us to explore. We are going to see that little shift come into play in this part of the story. Small warning for all of you out there, it's about to get spicy in here and maybe a little bit of an amuse-bouche on the Anathema spice train. You've been warned and we can't wait. So let's just dive in. So where we start off, Maevyth is back in training and Rykaia hints at her fear of Branimir. She's warning Maevyth to stay away from him because despite his restraint with her so far, Rykaia believes that he's gotten worse over the years and he's been struggling to control his emotions. And she kind of hints at this visit she had with him once where he almost strangled her to death. So for all that we love Branimir so far, he seems to be a bit of a risky character. Maevyth arrives in the training room where she works with Zevander on a new glyph, Propulszir. It's a defense glyph intended to repel, and Maevyth prepares to cast the glyph and accidentally glances down, catching sight of the massive bulge in Zevander's leathers. How convenient.
In his leathers.
In his leathers. We're all leathered up. So meanwhile, Zevander, unknowingly, he explains the power of the glyph to her and tells her that it provides her with a mental shield from those who can read her mind or probe her power. And that happens to be a gift that Rykaia holds. So she's able to read the mind of those she touches. So Maevyth kind of panics because she knows she's being set up for like some training and feeling very occupied with her bulge-filled dirty mind and is like kind of afraid that she's going to get exposed for being a little flirt. And she tries to will all of her thoughts of Zevander from her mind, but before she can, our sweet little Rykaia, tricksy girl, grabs her arm and then her lips curve into a knowing smile. She knows what's going on to that dirty little mind. So Maevyth attempts to clear her mind, internally screaming at her mind to show her something different. Stop thinking about this guy. And her mind goes completely silent. "Hello, Maevyth," a female voice said. I turned to find a willowy figure sauntering toward me. As she neared, her features sharpened into view, long, raven black hair and silvery eyes. And so this character announces herself as Morsana and tells Maevyth that she has much to do before she dies, but if Maevyth ever needs her, she's there. And she can be found in this dark place. She warns Maevyth there's something she should know about Zevander, but before Morsana can explain, she's brought out of the vision and sees Zevander, Dolian, and Rykaia standing over her. Now, after describing the experience, Dolian tells her this place was Caligoria, the dark space of the mind, a dangerous place. And he describes, in that space resides the dark side of you, the creature that feeds on rage, vengeance, and apathy. Everything living possesses this darkness, whether they care to admit it or not. But we are taught from a young age to suppress it. By going there, you are opening a door, and if you're not careful, it may be quite difficult to close it. So that's kind of like the end of that moment. Zevander's really into this training, so he starts showing off his sexy Let-a-Lee's skills. He's spinning this long staff, tossing it in the air and catching it, and commands Maevyth to continue practicing the Propulszir glyph. With this new distraction, can she do it? Can she keep her mind closed off from Rykaia, who continues to expose Maevyth's dirty mind between the two of them?
And the bulge.
The bulge has gone nowhere. So Maevyth, she's intrigued by these tricks that Zevander has, spinning his staff, and asks, and can she learn this technique so she can learn some fighting skills, maybe be able to defend herself. So Maevyth and Zevander share a cute little moment where they speak openly about being threats to each other and to those beyond the keep, and they bond over this realization that they're both connected to death. Those mercurial eyes found me again, brimming with dark amusement. Aren't we a pair? Come, Luna Mishka. Zevander. Maevyth in this moment guesses that her nickname must have some connection to the moon, and so she asks him about it, and he points to the corner of his eye, and she connects to the crescent moon and the shape that's in her eye now. And she asks, and Mishka? Witch, he responds. And we have it. Luna Mishka, our little moon witch, our adorable pet name from Zevander.
I wish I could just pull up Google Translate for that one.
Yeah. I had a hunch on the Luna thing, but Mishka, you've got me lost. So they have this exchange, and then Zevander guides Maevyth to stand in front of him, almost like he knows she's all about his bulge. He places his calloused hands over hers on the stick, showing her the hand-over-hand movements that are needed to spin the staff. And he moves her through a series of exercises and then steps away. Maevyth finds herself focusing on him until his eyes meet hers. And then he begins to circle her before gripping her waist again and finding him pressed against her back, calling for her to spin the staff faster and faster. And she thinks to herself, a rising heat warmed my blood, and I flushed at the thought of what I wanted him to do with those fingers. He tells her to let go of the staff. Before it can fall, he presses his palms to the top of her hands, feeling an intense heat in her wrists, and noticing the black smoke drift from their joint hands while the stick continues spinning on its own. Is it me doing this, or is it you? She asks. I'm supplying the power, but it's you who commands it, he responds. So she closes her eyes, and she focuses on the heat in her palms and thinks, in the darkness of my mind, I saw black swirls dancing around me, billowing through my veins like hot ribbons that throbbed in my muscles. What are you doing? He whispered in a shaky voice. And Zevander releases her abruptly and storms out of the session. Dolian asks what happened, and Maevyth tells him that somehow she felt like she was siphoning his powers into herself. And at that moment, a new glyph appears. Maevyth describes the power, saying, I felt like it was seducing me. The flame itself was pulling me towards something.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Interesting indeed.
This made me very happy. I felt like we were waiting, not only for the contact, we've been waiting for some intimacy here. And this felt intimate and hot and fiery in all of the ways that we want.
We were waiting for the bulge to get the attention it deserved. And it took a long time. I still wish that it was a little bit faster, or at least there was just more of that yearning in the very beginning to make this a little bit more sweeter. But it's still sweet nonetheless.
This moment was okay, here we go. We've got some things coming.
Right.
We're all wearing leather. We're all looking great. We're feeling hot. I feel like that was kind of missed at this moment because we did kind of stop halfway through part 2. But like Maevyth is like in her hotness. Like she has donned the leathers that make her feel naked and empowered at the same time. And so maybe it's not a coincidence that she noticed the bulge today, because like maybe Zevander's really liking what he's seeing and his bulge is bulging.
His bulge is bulging. That man has huge balls, literally and figuratively. I caught something in this part that I wanted to think about a little bit more. The way that she describes the power in her seducing her. Deimos and Morsana had a relationship, or she fell in love with him. How did she mysteriously fall in love with him when they were at war at some point, or they had a conflict at some point in the book? Like, does he have the power? Deimos have the power to seduce? And is that what we're seeing here with the Sablefyre?
Yeah, maybe she was like addicted to that magic. There was something in the story about like, yeah, she falls for him first, I think, and then she like starts following him around, and then he falls for her too. I think that was the story.
Yeah, in battles. She would follow him in battles.
Which, like, you know, goddess of death following a warrior in battle, like it makes sense and it's intriguing. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think we're gonna continue to be presented parallels between these 4 characters, our females and our males in the stories. I'm questioning whether Keri Lake is dangling a carrot and wants us to bite, and it's like not what it seems. I think she's kind of playing with us in a similar way when it comes to Branimir, because here we get a little bit of Branimir's like bad side, that like maybe he is a monster, but we're still not sure. We had this whole experience with Maevyth down in the dungeon and her singing to him and him sobbing and like this like heart-wrenching moment. And then we get a little like, hey, by the way, from Rykaia, like he almost strangled me to death once, so like don't get too confident. Now, we don't know about that experience, and like I think the way that you feel like Dolian is unreliable, I feel like Rykaia is unreliable. Like I love that character, but we know that she tells half truths and she's literally like not reliable. So it does make me wonder, like, what were you up to, Rykaia, that led to him maybe strangling you to death? Like, could you have provoked him? Was this an innocent exchange? I don't know. But good note. Don't just go wandering down there by yourself, Maevyth.
It's a really good point. Rykaia is not a reliable character whatsoever. And I think she's shown us that throughout the entire book, that she's kind of got this rebellious spirit about her that can't really be, not to say that she can't be trusted, but like you said, she's just a little bit flaky. But I do wonder the same. Keri Lake does tend to deal in these gray areas, which I love. It's not obvious to us who the real villain is right now, who the bad guy is. We're taught it's Cadavros. That one's obvious, but there's so much more, I think, going on in layers that we're discovering that we don't know the truth. And we don't have enough information. We can speculate, but that's the beauty of it. It's not just fed to us.
I agree. Like there's depth here, there's dimensionality. We're not just getting like the monster in the basement. We're getting a character that we feel for, and Rykaia like fits in that box in a very different way. I liked Rykaia a lot. So I loved seeing her in this scene in her glory. She is messing around with these two and she just gets like dealt this moment where she can just like giggle to herself because she can use her magic to read right into Maevyth's mind and confirm all of her suspicions.
Because she orchestrated the entire thing and now she's making fun of Maevyth for it.
Yes. Yeah, I love it. So we get this moment with Maevyth having a vision, seeing Morsana, and she makes a comment saying before she dies, like referring to Maevyth. And now I'm all worried again that, remember last time we talked about the meaning of the word anathema and its connection to sacrifice. And I'm like really worried now that this is foreshadowing and Morsana knows something that we don't. And like, is Maevyth gonna die?
That's sus. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Maybe it's a god speaking in their like little riddles, as I'm sure gods do, but it doesn't seem like a coincidence to me. Before she dies, there are things you must do, child. Like, yeah, okay.
I think when the goddess of death whispers in your ear that before you die, there are things you must do. I don't know that she's like mincing words about it. Like, I mean, I guess we're all gonna die, so you could take it that way, but I just don't take it that way. I am also kind of scared that Zevander is like the image of Deimos, but like I'm worried that he's like the reincarnation of Magkai, who has maybe like returned to make sure that the Korvakai bloodline stays extinct for good.
I don't think it could just be Maevyth that's, manifesting as a part of Morsana or is doing Morsana's bidding, and that no one else is in this story. I still really feel like the chaos, the Demosi in Eidolon's Keep really kind of alludes to it being Zevander. But Keri Lake's thrown us a curveball before, so it could very well be.
Well, the thing that has me questioning it is like in this story, Morsana falls for Deimos, and then like they are in love, but then this other mage Kai is like really mad about it and kills Deimos. And so why would Morsana, if she's now come back through Maevyth, why would she be warning her about Zevander? Wouldn't she want them to go and like create justice? Like why? I don't know.
Do we know for sure that she's warning her about Zevander?
I think in this scene she does reference Zevander. I think there's a later scene where there's a warning and we don't know who it's about.
I still think that Dolian has something to do with this. Like, there are some things alluding to Zevander being Deimos, or like a reincarnation of Deimos, and then we've got Maevyth and Morsana, but there's really no sign of Magicai yet. Like, we haven't heard anything allude to that. Could it be that Dolian maybe somehow the conduit to Magicai? Like, is that who he is? But maybe he doesn't know. What sort of cemented this for me is when we remember in part 1, when we first met him, his visions started to become unreliable. Why did his visions start to become unreliable? Was that just old age, or like him being senile, going crazy? Or could it be similar to Maevyth, who's seeing this goddess of death and having these visions? He's also affected by these visions. And so maybe he's not necessarily a bad person or being entirely malicious about withholding information from Maevyth, but maybe, he is on his own path, and maybe later we'll understand his prophecy if he is having to do with Magicai.
We need some Dolian dirt. Like, we need to know what's going on with Dolian. I know we love our theories, speaking to myself, but like maybe Morsana is simply warning Maevyth that Zevander is like, he is kind of plotting to kill her. We are in a point of the book where that is starting to shift a little bit, but like the whole purpose of him visiting her in the first place was to kill her and to end the bloodline. So like, point Morsana, you do have a reason to warn Maevyth that this guy doesn't have good intentions, and they haven't been clear with her about it. They've talked to her about her bloodline and how it's important, but they haven't talked to her at all about the Septimir. So maybe we'll give Morsana the benefit of the doubt on her intentions for 1 second. Give Zevander a chance to redeem himself.
And to be fair, I mean, maybe she didn't want to fall in love with Deimos in the beginning, right? They had a conflict, and then she somehow fell in love with him. And then we get this alluding from Maevyth that the Sablefyre was seducing her. Who knows, right? Like, maybe there's something there, like some angsty, you seduced me, you manipulated me, and maybe there is some of that between Morsana and Deimos. We just don't know.
I'm very intrigued by this. I kind of feel like Zevander's flames, like independently of Zevander, have a thing for Maevyth, and like maybe they just couldn't handle seeing her all laced up, and so they got busy. They got busy making things happen in the training ring.
Yes, and it's a double whammy, because even if this is some divine, godly prophecy that they're fulfilling together, they still want to fuck each other. I mean, that much is true.
They have to. They just have to. I did want to take a second to take us back to when Zevander visited Maevyth at the Bronwick house, and he tries to kill her. Part of how he tries to do that is he pushes the flames into her, and the way Keri Lake writes, she describes Maevyth moaning in pleasure. And so this scene just made me very happy, because it felt like, oh yeah, there's that thing again, and our girl is very happy to have the Sablefyre shoved into her. And so maybe they remembered her. Maybe they said, oh hey, you pretty girl.
Right? Maybe that's why Morsana is so upset about it. She's like, I cannot get enough of the Sablefyre. Don't fall victim, Maevyth. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Caligora, how that was described, because when we talked about how Zevander kind of represses this Sablefyre and he kind of sees it as a curse instead of a potential blessing to him in some way. And so the way that it was described reminds me of the teachings of this shadow self, which is the idea of, when we repress traumas or things about ourselves that we don't like or feel shame around, they can kind of take on this entity of its own. And that's how it gains power. It's used in a lot of like spiritual teaching and therapy. And so I'm starting to think about these themes coming back to what I shared in Zevander's episode. It's like how his curse could be affecting him as he continues to suppress it versus embracing it, or confronting it. And so I thought that was really interesting how this place was described, because I feel like this dark place is exactly what Zevander is subjecting himself to.
Do you think that he's trapped in the dark space? Is that what you're hinting at?
Not necessarily. I think that this is just a theme that Keri Lake is trying to show us throughout the book. Like maybe there is this idea that Zevander's seeing this as such a curse as opposed to a blessing, and without actually embracing that side of himself, it's just going to continue to consume him.
Well, I mean, I found it interesting that it felt to me like the first thing we've experienced in Aethyria, where a similar kind of motif is appearing that existed in Foxglove Parish, which is like very restrictive, very much about control. And like with these people who are very gray in this world, it felt very interesting that there's like a place where all like your bad things live. And like if you even go near it, then you'll get stuck there and then you'll never be able to leave. And it felt like interesting that there's this place they've described when they felt like very free in that regard. But it seems to be that there's a line and you can't cross that line.
You're right. It's like this repressive thing. It's like you have to abide by these rules or else you'll be cast away into the Eating Woods, into Caligora, whatever that may be.
I think there was a mention of Zevander going into Caligora, and like that's where he learned how to use his powers. So clearly to him there was some value there, but again it was that kind of warning of like there's a usefulness, but you have to be careful. You can't get stuck there. And obviously knowing Maevyth is like our innocent little flower. She doesn't know anything about this world. She doesn't know anything about her magic or her people. So she has to rely on all these other people to help her understand. So, but I hope we get more glimpses of this dark space with Morsana.
Zevander struggles to regain control after his heated training session with Maevyth. Never in his life had he felt such a loss of control, as if she were commanding the flame herself, and never had he felt the hum of excitement vibrating through his blood as he had in that training room. So we're getting some thirsting on a spiritual level from Zevander here. More ways than one. Zevander learns that the Flamelian that harmed Rykaia was captured by Revezio, and while interrogating him, the Flamelian reveals he has an enchantment on him that renders him immune to the Letli's powers. So as punishment, Zevander throws him into Branimir's creepy spider dungeon to die. While all of that is happening, Maevyth is in the bath, also thirsting over Zevander, and she feels something on the back of her neck. It seems like it's a series of strange bumps in a weird pattern. In her reflection, she sees it on the water, and she notices this silver glow, very similar to the glyphs that she'd seen on her hand, but for some reason, this one appeared on her neck. It's in this moment that Maevyth realizes how much her life has changed, and she admits to herself that even though she'd been confined to the castle, her life very much felt bigger than it ever had in Mortasia.
She loves it. She loves the keep. She loves her new friends.
I feel like she should just be the woman of the keep. It's her time. Hey, maybe that's why she was given Lady Redain's room.
He can't resist. You just need to admit it, Zevander. You're giving off all the signs.
And I feel like our dear Rykaia is just the little conductor, puppet master, pulling all the strings. Channeling this new acceptance of change pulls out one of the dresses Rykaia picked for her. A long black velvet hooded dress with a lace-up corset and low-cut bodice that lifted her breasts. She hesitates, feeling an old expectation of modesty, and considers changing before realizing that old expectation was certainly not hers, and decided that the dress was perfect.
I want this dress.
Feminist shit here.
Yes.
Maevyth finds some food to bring to Branimir before colliding with Zevander in the dungeons, his angry eyes staring down at her. For the first time, she fully absorbs his uncovered face with his deep scar and dark veins branching across his lips and down his chin. It had a ghastly beauty to it, giving him a fierce appearance, with his scintillating eyes that reminded me of a blazing fire. Zevander's unwillingness to allow Maevyth to visit or feed Branimir causes her to ask him if he's upset about her regarding the training session. Zevander cages her against the wall, demanding to know what happened during the training. This part is chef's kiss steamy. He comes closer, his face inches from hers, causing her blood to vibrate. He asks her what she felt, and his gaze falls to her lips. In her vulnerability, she admits to feeling aroused. I can't believe that she did that. I would have come up with anything else, but I love that she said it.
You know what? She's like, my tits are out. I'm just gonna put it out there. It's like, is now the time to act coy? No, it's not. We're not in that room.
He caged her in.
I think she's kind of like she's almost seems kind of like mousy, like coy in this moment, but I think she's like firing back. She's like, you want me, then want me, you know, like quit pussyfooting around.
Yes, I love that. I love that this is all coming to fruition now, because I didn't feel like there was a lot of this will they, won't they energy at the beginning. And now we're finally getting it. Let's go. Embrace that thirst for blood. So Zevander tells Maevyth she can sing to Branimir, but only under his watch. Maevyth asks how Zevander feels about killing and whether he thinks of killing her. He admits that yes, he does think about killing her, but also admits that the world would be far duller if he did. Maevyth admits to producing poisons back in Foxglove, and Zevander tells her the ability to kill doesn't make you a killer, and everything is poison with the proper dose, even you. Maevyth questions his meaning and tells her there are those who fear flirting with death, while some of us find it utterly enthralling. I love how smart this banter is. Can we talk about that?
She has made death the third object in this little love situation and is just like playing it like a pawn, and somehow it's hot. Like it's hot.
Yeah, why is it so sexy?
The talk of death is like turning them all on. Turning me. Yeah.
Cut me on the bone arch, daddy. So Maevyth questions his meaning, and he tells her this. She asks him what he, a dangerous scorpion killer, fears. He forces her to ask first, suggesting that she doesn't seem to fear the things that she should. This is the banter. I'm afraid of being completely alone in the world. He responds, I fear the unknown, the uncalculated fragments of time that are left to fate, the whims of fate that are irksome intrusions, and yet he canted towards me, as if to kiss me. His lips were mere inches from mine. Who could have predicted that one touch of your pounding pulse would be so disarming?
The romantic Zevander, he just can't resist.
He seemed like such a man of few words, so I'm kind of into this. I'm into seeing this side of him. We saw a little bit of that last episode. He was getting a little bit poetic, but this
is out loud.
Yeah.
This is vulnerability, and
right?
This is calling her disarming.
He thumbs the curve of her neck before saying, what wicked spells you weave, little witch. Zevander restrains himself, warning Maevyth, my instinct is to break whatever stirs my impulsive nature. So Zevander wants to break Maevyth, but in a sexy way. I'm pretty sure it's in a sexy way.
He's being honest. What was the thing that he said at the beginning of training the last time or whatever? It was like, if people think that you're weak, that's just like a weapon that you can use against them because you are not weak. And so I think that Zevander knows that he's got like a boss bitch on his hands. And even though she's like checking all the boxes of like an alluring, lovely woman, like she's not weak and she can challenge him.
Zevander feels like a fully fledged man. Like a man. I know in some books I've read, I'm curious if you feel the same way, Sarah. Sometimes they feel a little bit young. Like we're older, not older ladies. That sounds like we're in our 60s, but we're in our 30s. Like we're not 20 anymore. So it's refreshing. I don't even know that we know how old Zevander is really in our years.
Yeah, he's like over 100 years old. Might be 200. I can't remember. There was some references.
Yeah.
He's up there.
He doesn't feel young. Like for example, Rhysand to me personally felt younger than me. Like
Mm,
25 maybe.
yeah.
Whereas Zevander feels like he's like maybe a little bit older than me, like a man.
Yeah. The dialogue is like very helpful because it does feel much more human. There's depth, there's vulnerability. It's not just about who they are to each other. They have their own things going on. And I think maybe that's part of the benefit of them feeling so separate while we are kind of used to at this point in the story them already being intertwined. They're individual characters, and so we're still getting all that's going on in each of their worlds that are like inch by inch getting closer to each other.
We've waited. It's finally happening. I want to put some respect on Maevyth, though, and her finally breaking away from this narrative that she's been subjected to. And I think she's doing this in a few ways, even just her acknowledging that she doesn't necessarily want to go back to her old life and she might actually like it here. But her relationship with Rykaia feel super feminist sisterhood vibes to me. And I'm starting to feel like we're moving away from this oppressed, internalized misogyny to her starting to like just embrace all of these different pieces of herself that she had to really push down before. And even if you think about Rykaia, just in general, I know you mentioned like she kind of seems like this forest fairy sprite. I kind of see her similarly, but more like a dark, untamed, feminine energy versus Maevyth kind of gives off this more modest, oppressed energy with like a controlling upbringing.
Mm,
But if you think about it, both of them have been punished for it.
totally.
Right?
Yes.
Maevyth was still punished. Even Rykaia, being this wild, untamed, dark thing, was still punished by, being subjected to horrible things at the brothel.
Right.
So it is an interesting parallel, and I feel like Keri Lake is really trying to bring some of this out.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're like opposing feminine energies. Like, I think that Rakaya has been that kind of like carefree energy in spite of the fact that she has been oppressed. She's not willing to be oppressed and she's willing to deal with the consequences where
Yeah.
Maeve has not lived that life. She has always just tended to follow the rules because she felt like she stuck out anyway and she didn't want to be seen in that same light that everyone kept casting on her. I also noticed that Rykaia has an ability to bring out a version of Maevyth, and so we're seeing this development occur.
Yeah.
And I think part of where it's coming from is that Maevyth is kind of being taken care of by her, and I don't think that she's been taken care of before. In the Bronwick house, she really cared for Alicia. She was the one that was going to her kind of being like, are you really sure you want to have this relationship with Riften? And had to kind of watch over her because that's all she had. But in this new arrangement, Maevyth is kind of like one foot out the door until this part of the book. And Rykaia is the one who's helping her see that there's more and more to herself. The one who's helping her come to terms with her trauma too, telling her that like, okay, that girl died that one day, like maybe she deserved to die. So like stop feeling bad about it. It's okay.
I love that perspective. I also feel like Zevander is giving her this moment to kind of step away from the way that she's learned to act and behave. But there is a part, I believe it's in this part, maybe when she's training with him, Maevyth makes a reference to Zevander, making her feel strong beside him instead of weak. It was something along those lines anyways, and it seemed like a bit of an ode to this divine masculinity and like what it means to be like a healthy masculine man, what it might mean to be loved and feel safe by a real man. So I adore that for Maevyth too. I feel like this is uncharted territory and she's kind of relearning what it means to be feminine and be in that power, being a woman and being protected by a man and by her sisterhood, her friend Rykaia around her. So it feels like Keri Lake is really giving us the time and the space to give these characters the depth that they deserve in this. And it's something that I think a lot of us can relate to. It's you know, it's a plot point, but it's something that I think we can take into our real lives and sort of internalize.
Yeah, I agree. Like growth happens in the small moments, not especially in stories, because we often get those big moments and we're supposed to take so much out of them. But Keri Lake is giving us these like little interactions that are really telling us a lot with how she's using these words. So I'm excited. I'm excited for all of this. How often do you think Zevander sends pervy weirdos down to Branimir for a snack? I just love it that he's just like, oh, we'll just feed him to Branimir. Oh, you think you know so much about the Letterleys? Put him in the dungeon with Branimir.
I mean, it saves money on the meat bill, the grocery bill.
You know what? When I was reviewing my notes, I was like, oh my God, I did not catch this before. But like Maevyth and Zevander run into each other in like the dungeon hallway before he cages her against the wall. And he's like, you don't need to go feed Branimir. He's not hungry. And I was like, oh my God, it's because he ate the Flamelian guy. And I didn't
Right?
the first read that that just kind of got slid in.
It's got to be a common recurrence. I mean, wouldn't you, if you were some big bad warrior that was in charge of doing the king's bidding and had all of these extra bodies laying around and you weren't going to eat them? Are they, Branimir will eat them?
Branimir, yeah, him and all the spiders.
It's amazing.
I love that. I love how he just like finds all these little ways to get around the rules. We just need to take a moment of respect for the dungeon moment and Maevyth being caged in his arms and the bodice cleavage and whispering by her lips and then thumbing the curve of her neck and then calling her a little witch and fearing the unknown while he utterly finds her disarming. Like these delicious moments, we just need to talk about the tension. It is palpable, and I think I might print this part of the book off and put it in my book library.
Zevander is 100% up there with like top bookmen that I have ever read. And my list is short. We're still reading a lot of different books, but I will say I think he lives up there with two other Keri Lake bookmen. So,
you know, I didn't know that I needed to be caged by a large man like Zevander, but there was like a physical response that I was having as I was reading it. It's like the feeling of having a large man towering over you and you being just held in that space. It's like there's like a heat that you can feel. Powerful, you know?
Yes, yes. He hasn't really given her a lot of hints that he's into her, and like he's just slowly starting to open up, and she's had these feelings about him. We know that, and we know he's had feelings about her, but this is the first time they're kind of admitting it to each other face to face.
It does kind of feel like Zevander is like unable to contain himself and he is just starting to kind of release these words to her and like caging her. And so anyway, before we dive back in, let's just keep reading here because we've got a bit more juice.
It's
so
changing though.
The caging was beautiful. Okay, so an urgent message arrives to Zevander. He's been summoned to the king's court. And there's rumors about a mysterious nomad attacking guards in the hovel. Rumors which happen to have been stirred by our man Zevander. And they are spreading, so the work is getting done. Zevander is out front of the keep and he notices Maevyth happens to be watching him from her new window. And he reflects on her long, lazy curls spilled over her slender shoulders, her lips curved into a biteable pout. The soft glow of her pale skin gave her an ethereal and ghostly aura, delicate, breakable. Breakable again. He wants her throat. We know it. He momentarily has regretful thoughts about his restraint the night before in the dungeon hallway, wishing that he had kissed her or touched her or acted in some way, while also admitting to himself how addictive he knows she would be if he gave in. And unfortunately, duty calls, so he has to go to the court to see King Sagarin, and the king is all worked up. He's fearing this rebellion from the villagers, and so he tasks Zevander with escorting Prince Dorjan to the Initios ceremony so that he can protect him from possible assassination attempts. And this Initios ceremony signals the beginning of the festivities and the blessing for the tournament who will see who gets to claim the princess's virginity. Yay!
Amazing.
This is a good moment for us to remember the brutal plague that the king has tied to his amulet, and that is why it's very important that the prince is protected. But who cares about the princess? She'll be fine. During the ceremony, a hooded figure fires a crossbow at Dorjan, nearly missing him. The attack sparks an uprising as angry villagers, frustrated by the king's greed, clash with the guards, and the crowd begins to chant. Cadavros lives. Cadavros lives. The king will die. So Zevander springs into action. He summons his Sablefyre scorpion and then intimidates and disperses the crowd, allowing Dorjan to return safely to the castle. And Zevander finds him afterward, and Dorjan is pretty upset. He expresses his resentment toward his father. He blames him for this uprising and says that the king is more focused on appearances than addressing the issues of starvation and unrest with their people. And so this is really all his fault. Zevander's like, cool, I got places to be. So he leaves. He goes to the Black Salt Tavern and learns from a retired blacksmith about these growing rumors about Cadavros' return. The Nilivir in the village are desperate for salvation, and they believe Cadavros will save them from their miserable lives and give them the power of Sablefyre. Zevander runs into Gavroche, the young boy who he had sent to work with Madame Lazarine at the brothel earlier in the story, and he enlists him as a spy to gather information about any Cadavros-related rumors. Next, we find Maevyth back in Eidolon, and she steps out onto her balcony. She's got a mug of herbal tea. She's trying to tame her restless thoughts, and she gazes up. She sees the two moons and their crescent shapes that are inverted across from one another, and wonders what her sister might be doing and whether she's alive. She's still worried. Now, Maevyth notices these firefly-like insects called calastrias, I'm going to call them, and her glyphs start to glow. Then she's startled by Zevander's voice and notices him also standing on his balcony right next to hers. And he tells her that some believe that these fireflies harbor the essence of the gods. He tells her beauty is deceptive. They swarm and they kill birds, and only scorpions can withstand their venom. Now, the two of them discuss his young experiences with these insects and their lethal nature, and he talks about their enchanting beauty, even in spite of their lethal nature. Zevander confesses, I rarely trust the enchanting, particularly something so beautiful. Obviously, we're talking about Maevyth again, and he is obsessed with her, and we are reading between all the lines. Okay.
I love the subtle flirting here. I'm obsessed. And
He's like confessing to her. He just can't help confess without telling her that he really just wants her.
Right. And also the fact that they're balcony to balcony, they might as well be in each other's beds.
Accidental? No. Obviously, that's why he was pushing her so hard to take his mom's bedroom,
Right?
because they'd be right next to each other.
Oh, obsessed.
Now, Maevyth suggests that a man like Zevander probably doesn't trust anyone or anything. And he retorts, saying that she's standing on a balcony not far from where he sleeps. To which she responds, given how dangerous I am, it was probably foolish. I might just leap over your balcony one night and hold a blade to your throat while you sleep. Who does that sound like? Anyone we know? Remember, flirts back, telling her that he considers threats to his life an invitation. And he instantly leaps from the balcony onto Maevyth, cornering her against a wall again. He pulls his blade out and drags it against her stomach. His eyes, ravishingly intense, seemed captivated by my lips, the indisputable longing to devour them. He places the blade into her palm, curling her fingers around the hilt, then brushes the hair from her shoulders and angles his mouth toward her. Should you decide to carry through with your threat, I'll leave my balcony door unlocked, he says. Now, Maevyth gets pretty preoccupied with this dagger. Its scorpion tail carries an aura of his presence and seems to ignite all of her lustful thoughts about him. She tries to remind herself that he's a killer, but even as he stood before her with his dagger, she knew he would never hurt her. Now, later that night, they're alone, each in their own rooms, and Maevyth is visited by a ghostly figure, a Deimosi, with a skeletal body and soulless black eyes. And she realizes that she hasn't had visions of the dead since the night she arrived. Now, the Deimosi scrambles toward her and issues a cryptic warning Do not put your trust in him. The goddess of death will punish. Maevyth calls back, asking who shouldn't she trust, but the ghost has vanished. These 3 fiery scenes, and the escalation of the events is very funny to watch.
I can't believe that he put his knife on her stomach. That's wild. I'm not mad. Like, for some reason, I like it.
Yeah, I don't know why it's hot, but it is.
It is.
Is she still in the cleavage dress? We're assuming she's still in the hot ass dress, right? And he's probably just like, I need to touch her. Where can I touch her? I guess I'll just touch her stomach. I can't touch her where I want to touch her.
Yeah, I needed this. This was like a beautiful few chapters in the book.
Yes. I mean, my feeling is that Zevander is like full on addicted to her. Like, he can't wrap his head around it. He is not admitting it. He's just having this like fun little game. I feel like he's in hunter mode. And he doesn't even know what he's doing, but his inability to just admit it is killing me. But I am enjoying all of the subtext on this breakable, enchanting, beautiful, alluring. All the descriptive words that he manages to come up with are just like...
I have so many questions too, like this random Demosi coming and seeming to be a messenger of the goddess of death. Like, what is this?
It was very strange. Last episode, we spent a lot of time talking about Lady Rydane and where she might fit, but we didn't really talk about the king's children. And I got thinking, what if our suspicions are true and the king and Lady Rydane did have an affair of some sort? And maybe after Zevander and Lord Rydane were taken, we don't know who the prince or even the princess's mother is, and that information has been withheld from us. What if Lady Rydane like mothered the king's heirs or something, linking the prince's bloodline to Zevander's?
Now that you planted the seed with the king and Lady Rydane, I can't stop thinking about it. I also feel like Prince Dorjan might just be a plant. Like, maybe he's not even like his father's son. There was this alluding to him having these affairs, or not affairs, but like sleeping around a lot. He also seems to be very against his father's plans. And I don't know that that's uncommon in books for their like royal sons not wanting to fall in the footsteps of their father. But it is making me think twice about his legitimacy, I guess.
Yeah, I keep going back to like the king is like Lord Farquhar in Shrek because I just don't take him seriously. I feel like I kind of took like a left turn here on like your comment about that ghost that visits Maevyth. Like, it is interesting to have this other warning. I mean, in this one in particular, we don't know who they're talking about. There is no name, and Maevyth can't get that information. You kind of want to assume that it's an extension of the warning she got in the training room, but why is she seeing this ghost now? And why is it trying to warn her? It makes me wonder, like, can Maevyth only connect with Morsana in certain circumstances? Like where she can kind of cross over, or when she's in touch with her power or something. We haven't really gotten that information to understand how that element of magic, if we want to call it that, works yet.
The obvious thing for me would be that it's a warning about Zevander. Like, that's like the obvious one. I mean, it kind of makes sense too that she was just having an encounter with Zevander, right? I'm still dead set on it not being Zevander, but maybe it is. Maybe it is. Maybe there's this idea that because I'm convinced that Zevander is acting for Deimos, maybe there is this hesitation in Morsana that there could possibly be a repetition of what happened in the past with whatever Maevyth is doing with Zevander. You know, they obviously can't help but be drawn to each other, but maybe that is playing into it as well, and it could be Zevander. I don't know if it is, though. I'm not sold.
I think there's some truth to what you said earlier about the difference of the Sablefyre being present, of that curse, because we know that came into play in that story, like where she touched the paper and it was hot, and I think he got cursed with the Sablefyre by Magekai.
Yeah.
So there are differences, and we just don't quite understand yet.
The next morning, Maevyth is late for training and rushes to find Zevander, his scorpion dagger in her hand. When she finds him, he's in his study and he is seemingly irritable. She sits across from him at his desk while he decides to completely ignore her. Maevyth tells him that it's because of him and the dagger that she's late. Since she started sleeping with it beside her, she's slept like the dead. Interesting.
Cute.
Zevander offers that she keep the dagger and that they proceed to enjoy a little bit of a flirtatious, death-inspired banter together. Zevander asks Maevyth what she saw in her mind the day they trained with the staff. She tells him she felt a total loss of control, like the staff was controlling her, or that something inside of her was. Something that felt familiar, protective, like a warm blanket. Something she trusted, like gentle ribbons of fire. He stares at her in confusion and tells her, "The amount of magic you pulled from me would have killed anyone else, burned them from the inside out. You have a very dangerous gift, Maevyth. Were you anyone else, you'd be considered a threat, and I eliminate threats." Maevyth promises never to do it again and says she doesn't really understand it anyway. He immediately challenges that and tells her that yes, she will in fact do it again, so he can better understand the mechanics.
The mechanics.
Okay.
The mechanics.
Just the mechanics. I just need to better understand the science behind this. He asks her to place her hands against his and to take as much of the flame as she can. But if it becomes too much, to tell him. "Promise you'll tell me, Maevyth," he says, and she nods. "I promise." Heat hit the center of my palm, a pulsing radiance that beat into my wrist, my forearm, and my elbow, to my shoulder and across my chest. I closed my eyes as the heat warmed my insides. "Tell me how it feels, Maevyth." His voice, God, his voice tickled my imagination while that glorious sensation snaked through my blood. Ah, this is killing me. Heat simmered and heightened. Sorry, I'm like getting so into it. Whew. Heat simmered and heightened, my muscles trembling, softening, yielding to the power that throbbed in my blood and muscles in erotic waves of pleasure. Lips parted, I tipped my head back as the ribbons of flame weaved in and out of my veins, as if it longed to touch every corner of me. Zevander keeps upping the heat, checking in with Maevyth as she internally writhes under the tension and heat welling up inside of her. Another rush of burning heat flooded my body, like scorching lava, but God, it felt so good. She begs him not to stop, and his fingers curl into hers before another round of fire blazes through her. "What are you feeling?" he asks. "Chaos," she says on a choked breath. I opened my eyes. His hair clung to his damp forehead where beads of sweat had gathered. "More," I rasped. God damn! The intensity of heat pouring through me had me tipping my head back, and I cried out, nails digging into his hands. The heat snapped to cold as he released my hands. "What the seven hells are you?" It took me by surprise. He lurched toward me, clamped his hand around my nape, and crushed his lips to mine. Whatever disdain he'd felt moments ago melted in the heat of his kiss. "You are a fucking torment, Lunamishka." And he dug his fingers into my nape and dragged me in for another kiss. That was intense. They basically just had energy sex. That was so intense.
Magic
It
fire.
all just like came flooding back to me reading that part.
Oh my God. This is not what I thought. This is not how I thought it was going to go down, but the lip crushing. I was ready for the lip crushing.
I was ready for the lip crushing too. I was not expecting her to plead for more like this, but it was full on sexual innuendo land here. Zevander orders Maevyth to leave, and she begs to know if she did something wrong. He tells her that she did nothing wrong, but before she goes, he calls to her again and says, "Maevyth, we can never do this again." Maevyth retreats to her room and creates herb-filled sachets called weavers to ward off nightmares. Rykaia joins her and learns that Maevyth sees the dead in their castle, as if that is unusual. Maevyth shares that she hadn't until the night before and tells Rykaia about the white-haired, pale, black-eyed woman that she had seen. Rykaia asks if she said anything, and Maevyth confesses she told her not to trust him, but she doesn't know who him is. Rykaia appears to know the woman who visited Maevyth, and knows she wasn't burned after death like most. Rykaia skirts Maevyth's questions when she asks who she was, and instead tells her that there is pain and grief entwined in every stone of their castle. She just called Zevander Sablefyre Chaos. That's what she did. I'm feeling the Deimos Morsana energy coming together, mingling for the first time in centuries.
It's giving Morsana Deimos for sure.
Right? But there's something about this ghost woman Deimos-y that visited Maevyth as well. And I had a thought while I was looking at this, could it be Lady Redain? Like,
Yeah.
why else would Rykaia not share who it was?
I was thinking the same thing. Maybe she's actually talking about Branimir. Like, maybe this ghost was killed by Branimir. And I kind of feel like Lady Rydain was killed by Branimir too. And I do think that that could have been her. I mean, there's something about this person not being burned would suggest that their body was not available to be burned. Rykaia is kind of saying, oh, have you been seeing spirits? Because typically the spirits are released when they're burned, and so you wouldn't have them hanging around. If they had a more like morbid death, then they might feel like they had some sort of like unfinished business. And I could fully see Lady Rydain, the ghost of Lady Rydain, haunting Eidolon's keep, and Rykaia being like, oh yeah, there she is again. Hey, Mom.
I mean, yeah, I could 100% see it. I'm still not clear on who Maevyth is not supposed to trust. Like, this feels like a massive mystery to me. I love this. There's a book that I'm reading right now that is kind of a whodunit, and this feels very similar to that, like trying to uncover who the person is she isn't supposed to trust. I personally still think it's Dolian. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm crazy and it is Zevander. I feel like we're being pulled in all different directions here. I'm not sure. It's one of them.
It's one of them. These boys, we're not supposed to know, but hopefully we'll get some more spirit visits and we'll clear it up. Do we want to revisit this super hot scene for one more second? Something changed when I read this scene and like he starts asking her to tell him how she feels. I just feel like he's doing it on purpose, but then he comes across like he's not. But I mean, it was hot. And
yeah, just for the mechanics.
Just for the mechanics. That's what you say when you're like friends with benefits and like something happens and you're like, maybe we should do that again for the mechanics, you know? Zevander has not been as open about how he felt during training and how he felt during this moment. And so I need to know if Zevander gets as turned on by these flames when he shoves them into Maevyth as much as she does, because like he was giving it to her.
I don't know whether to be pissed off at him or respect his restraint in this situation.
He asks him not to stop, but then he does like grab her by the neck and kisses her.
I can imagine he's so confused too about this whole thing. Like he has no idea why she's able to wield this Sablefyre. He even said anyone else would have been killed. They wouldn't have been able to handle it, but instead she's over here begging him for it. Oh my God, it's so good. When we finally get some spice, like I don't even need spice if we're getting this. This is like the epitome of making me feel things without the two characters having to do more than kiss.
The creativity that goes on, like we have more. There is more spice coming. And the creativity is off the charts. Like you have not seen this before.
So teenage angsty, I'm ready.
Days pass between this super hot moment in the office. During that time, Maevyth is just like having a time. She's studying bones with Dolian and Allura. She's training with Zevander. She's even befriending Magda, the housekeeper. She's singing to Branimir and she's teaching Rykaia how to make weavers. And so she's like learning a lot about the people in Zevander's circle, including the Ledelees who live at the keep. And Casimir, who we haven't heard a ton about. What we know about him is that he's been in love with Rykaia forever and has a tendency to kill anything that even looks at her sideways. Very like Azriel vibes, can I just say? Now, Allura visits Maevyth in Zevander's mother's room and offers to help her with the next puzzle in the book. And so they get to work using echolocation to project the image of the puzzle onto their hands and then use a glyph to project that image inside of their mind so they can try to figure out how to get inside the book. Now, as they're doing it, Maevyth experiences a flash of an image, and she recognizes that it's a massive tree with curled branches and old bark. She discovers a carved image on the inside with a woman's face etched into the bark and the limbs that are made to look like arms reaching over top of her. Allura says this is the Grymswood. It's the cursed tree that lies at the bottom of the Crossbow Trench, the forest of the dead. They say the tree houses the soul of a powerful priestess. And Maevyth recalls that this is the trench where the Corvicae were sent to die. She says she's in pain. It's like she can feel it, and she longs to free this woman. Now, beneath the tree, Maevyth spots a fancy silver whistle, and Allura urges her to give it a try. So she blows on it, nothing happens, until a distant rumble reaches toward her ears like rolling thunder. Maevyth describes, another massive shadow zipped overhead, and the ravens all shot up into the sky, making way for something enormous that perched itself against the castle wall. An enormous, feathered dragon, whose claws scraped against the stones of the castle wall, hopped its way over to the balcony. I studied the silvery eyes that were all too familiar to me. Raivox? At least 8 meters tall, his claws alone were half the length of my body. I recognized those tiny crescent markings on him. I glanced down at the whistle in my hands and back to him. Then a pounding sound at Maevyth's door startles her, and she looks away. When she looks back, Raivox is gone. And Rykaia enters. She's angry, and she seems to really have a thing against Allura. Maybe it's anger, maybe it's jealousy, we're not really sure. She pulls Maevyth away and down the staircase, telling her she's leading her on a little adventure. Next, we see Rykaia drawing a vertical line on the wall with her finger, and the line glows bright blue, creating a slit into the outdoors on the other side. She pushes her hand through the seam and tells Maevyth it's called a cleaving, a way to move across spaces quickly. Rykaia then pulls a vial of purple fluid and pours it over Maevyth's head and tells her it will cover her mortal scent. Rykaia also puts a glamour on Maevyth and herself, making them look like old, gaunt women. And boy, do they have a good laugh over that one. Now, in the next breath, they appear in a cobblestone alleyway in Costalwick. Maevyth calls the town beautiful, and Rykaia tells her about other more beautiful places, such as Wintertide, where their mother grew up. Maevyth witnesses 2 poor children and offers them her cloak. Rykaia tells her they're spindlings, those who cannot afford vivicantum and therefore cannot sustain their power, so they live in poverty. Rykaia quickly changes the subject to the becoming ceremony, the biggest celebration in all of Nyxteros, where the princess will offer up her virginity and eventually find herself in the king's coupling room to do the old deed. And this is a room where he typically has taken his mistresses, separate from the royal chambers. Rykaia then pulls both of them into a dress shop filled with elegant gowns lining the walls, and Rykaia forces Maevyth to choose a dress, even though Maevyth feels strongly that she should not be attending this event. Now, they both choose dresses, black for the death goddess, red for the temptress, and Maevyth also chooses a long black chain with a scorpion to accent her black rose jacquard gown. Who's the temptress now, Maevyth, with your scorpion necklace? Now, they put the dresses and the jewels on the tabs of these ugly nobility women that they have disguised themselves as, and they run out of there. Rykaia tries to relieve Maevyth's concerns about the event, telling her that everyone will be wearing masks, so it'll be really easy to hide who they are. They move through this new cleaving that Rykaia creates, and then rather than returning into the dungeon, unfortunately find themselves alone in the grassy front of the castle, where all of the dangerous fire drakes live. Rykaia screams and tells them to run. They run as hard as they can, but the beasts close in on them. Before they're about to be eaten by these monsters, Maevyth remembers her whistle, and she stops. She tells Rykaia she's going to call her own little pet. And just then, a distant echo of a roar comes from overhead. A flash of black is the only warning before a treachery of ravens swoop at the drakes before they're cornered again. A thud sounds beside Maevyth, and she turns to find Raivox by her side. She reaches out to pet him, and he roars, sending a blast of silver from his mouth over the 3 cowering drakes. He's come to my rescue twice now. It's almost as if he can sense when I'm in danger.
Rykaia meets Raivox.
She's scared of him, though, which you don't see her scared too much.
No one knows what they are.
And they're huge. Things happening here. We are talking about the trench again. This trench is very important. Like, I'm saying it. I think that the bones that Maevyth can call with her bone whip might actually be from the trench. And I think that maybe she was born there. Like, it just keeps coming up. Now, when they were going through this whole puzzle and they talk about this powerful priestess, it got me wondering, could the powerful priestess be the Crone Witch? Like,
Interesting.
maybe Morsana freed the crone witch from the tree where she was stuck so she could watch over baby Maevyth. Because I feel like this would like make sense with the whistle too, because maybe it was the crone witch who led the ravens or the raptors near Maevyth that day, and she kind of like facilitated the death baptism because that's like part of their people.
I love that. I love the idea that it could be the crone witch.
Yeah.
My initial thought was that it was Maevyth's mom somehow. That's the
Mm.
priestess. Like, we remember that dream from the beginning and how this woman is pushed off of a cliff. Could that
Mhm.
have been an exile to the Crisurian Trench?
Yeah.
Right? Or perhaps she was the one that was forced to suffer there for some reason and like put into the tree. And she was thought to be one of the last of the Corvicae people. She gets her daughter out, and maybe the crone witch was sent to look out for her, right? Like you said before in the last episode, to protect Maevyth. The crone
Yeah.
witch is involved.
She's involved. We know, I mean, she does give off like priestess energy, like witchy priestess, old lady energy. I do feel like it could fit. And
Right.
she is right by that trench. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about Maevyth's mom. Like, I almost think, like, does she even have a mom? Is Morsana her mom? Like,
True.
I don't know. How was she created? Like, even in that book, it's like the baby is there.
Yeah.
A lot of mystery. I feel like we need to like map this out, like on a literal map or a timeline or something.
Oh my gosh, we're gonna look crazy. We should do it. We should definitely do it one day. I could see us having a whiteboard with all the little red strings intertwining. It'll
Yeah.
get chaotic. We'll be there for hours.
We also got a little bit about the queen, finally. We heard about the queen and that she died not that long ago. And this confirmation that the king did, in fact, have mistresses and take them to the coupling room.
The coupling room. All of this is so gross, honestly. Like, even his poor daughter having to be screwed to just become a woman. Like, that's her becoming. Like, that's awful. It's just all gross.
It is. It's the nightmare. It's the worst. But I do feel like this Lady Rydane theory is really starting to have some weight to it.
It is. Oh my gosh, it really is. And like, this was prophesized, Sarah. You prophesized this from the very beginning.
That's right. The very beginning, Lady Rydane. We also got a little bit of a nugget in the shops that like Rykaia makes a comment about women being able to own property. And I think like Maevyth's like, oh, like that's weird. And she's like, why is that weird? But further to the whole idea of like Lady Rydane being more powerful and also like the keep being hers, it would make sense that like however it came to be that she could have this keep. I mean, they talk about it being passed down through the family or being in the family for a long time.
Yeah.
But I am building up Lady Rydane a lot in my head, so she better come through.
She better be a badass. We've got a lot riding on Lady Rydane and the Crone Witch. I mean, my bet is still on there's something going on with Dolian here. Like, I can't let it go. I'm not letting it go. I still think that he could possibly be our Magikai. He's the only one missing from the story here. So that's what I'm riding on. And I'm definitely with you on this Lady Rydane / Crone Witch train.
Yeah. Anything to bring them back, you know?
Also, one last thing that I noticed, and this was recent, like it took me a while to like start to piece this together, but I keep seeing so many similarities to the Eating Woods through all of this. Like, we've kind of just stopped talking about the Eating Woods for the most part. Like, we've moved on from that, but we just learned about this tree. And I've also noticed this word of branching, branched, branch being used to describe so many different things throughout the book, like Zevander's scars in, I think, a couple chapters. And so maybe it is just a coincidence, or maybe it's not. It feels like it's some sort of like symbolism or like symbolic repetition to me. Like Keri like wants us to connect this word to a broader meaning. And it leads me to think of like branch, tree, the Eating Woods. Why is this word so relevant?
Yeah, I like that question a lot because did the people name it the Eating Woods? And if they did, like why? Because they banish people into the woods. And it's like they know there's a creature in there. It's not like it's like the woods. It's that there's this beast that lives in there that they're actively feeding. So maybe the name came before and is tied to something. We typically think of nature as being like a natural element, something that is like to be embraced and to be like preserved. And at the same time, there are forces of nature that are not good. And so I love that, like this idea of how does nature play a role, and when is it for good and when is it for bad? When is it kind of manipulated into something dark?
This idea of death and rebirth has come up a
Mm-hmm.
lot, like this trend. And so, how does that play into everything as well?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's got me on my toes.
Yes, this is a very exciting point in the book. And we are more than halfway at this point, and the return of Raivox was just like sheer joy. Because like we knew that he was going to come back. Like how could he not come
Yes.
back? He's so important. But we're also getting the same kind of strategy she's taken with other parts of the book where like we get him, but we don't fully get him. And we still don't totally understand the dynamic between him and Maevyth.
It's such a mystery for me to like continue to unravel that I feel like I might even just be overthinking things now reading the book. I'm like, ooh, branching.
We have like branches and bark and like,
Right?
yeah.
There's
Yeah.
something going on there. I don't know.
But like, yeah, there is. Even the moons, like their magic system is all tied in with nature in one way or
Yes.
another. Like there's the sun, there's the moon, and there's all of these other aspects. Like even the spindlings, they feel like connected to nature. They've got like horns and they've turned into kind of animals.
Even Zevander's little nickname, Moon Witch.
Moon witch.
Maevyth stands in her room admiring the scorpion necklace. Allura appears behind her. Maevyth asks Allura what is known about the Corvugon, and Allura mentions that while they're similar, they're very different from their dragon cousins. Maevyth asks if they bond to those who hatch them, and Allura tells her it wouldn't be unusual. She'd once read of a woman who found a dragon egg while hiking in the Veretian mountains, and to this day visits her and allows her to feed it. They're very intelligent creatures. Some believe they're even capable of communication, and the Corvugon were fiercely protective of the Corvicae people. During this interaction, Allura shares that Dolion told her that Maevyth hatched the egg. Maevyth finds that very strange and tries to remember if she ever told him that. My mind puzzled over when I would have told him, or how he might have known. In all our interactions, I couldn't recall having mentioned the Corvugon egg. Rykaia enters the room and seems to scare off Allura, and when she leaves, Rykaia moans about how the woman smells like jasmine. And Maevyth realizes that Rykaia has a crush. Cute. We love a little bit of LGBTQ action in a book. So Rykaia finds some goblets for a mysterious liquid she brought to Maevyth's room. She shares of her fondness of tonics and how they help to pull her from reality. Rykaia casts a spell to open the bottle and fills the goblets with crystal blue liquid. Maevyth smells it and finds a spicy, fruity scent like blueberries, cinnamon, and a hint of nutmeg. That sounds amazing. Delicious. Rykaia asks Maevyth to dance, mentioning the becoming ceremony and the dancing that will occur. Rykaia plays the role of the man, showing Maevyth how to dance. Through their conversation, we learn that Aethyria is quite a sexually liberal place where love of all forms is celebrated. We don't choose our mates, so they could be a man, a woman, or sometimes, if two are bonded and one dies, they might bond again with the opposite sex. Maevyth is surprised to hear that there are mates in Aethyria, and according to Rykaia, they form quite a strong bond. The conversation turns to Zevander, and Rykaia shares that as far as she knows, she's never seen him with a woman ever. As they both polish off the bottle, Rykaia tells Maevyth, "You might want to close your door tonight. The liquid is a bit of an aphrodisiac, and you're probably going to need to fuck something. And there are far too many men in this castle who would gladly oblige." In an attempt to burn it off, Rykaia hops onto the bed and starts jumping like a child. Maevyth asks her why she's doing this, and Rykaia shares that since Maevyth arrived, she doesn't want to sleep anymore. She wants to jump and dance and breathe again. This hits Maevyth right in the heart, realizing how much Rykaia reminds her of Alicia. She joins in and fully lets go of everything holding her back. In the past, Maevyth had a really good relationship with Alicia, that she had the ability to just kind of let go and be innocent and have these moments of laughter and presence. So it's really nice to see her experience that with Rykaia.
Yeah, she's like pulling her right out of her shell. She's like, she's boosting her confidence. She's making her feel good.
I love it. I love the sisterhood.
Yes, me too.
Also, I had to add this in because It could just be a coincidence or like one of Dolian's visions that he knew about the egg. But it's still weird that he kept that close to his chest and never really mentioned it to Maevyth. And it kind of came to her indirectly from Allura's mouth.
Yeah, I didn't catch this, honestly. I think when I read it, I just assumed that Zevander told him because Zevander also saw the egg, but we know nothing is like by accident. So Maevyth picking up on the fact that it feels weird and her not just assuming that like someone said something is interesting.
It could just be, Dolian saw this vision. It has nothing to do with any of my theories, but I don't know. It's just kind of weird. It's rubbing me the wrong way.
It's rubbing me the wrong way. Well, fair. This is the first that we've heard in the entire book that there are mates in Aethyria, and I am just a sucker for fated mates, and this made me so happy because, like, come on now, where are we going? So I was very excited about Rykaia's little sprinkling here.
Right. And also just the fact that she says that Zevander has really never been with a woman.
It felt like such a sister thing to say. Like almost like she assumes he's like repulsive to everyone else. And like, yeah, I've never even like seen him look at a woman before you. Like, but at the same time, we know Zevander is like a pretty gruff man.
Also, how Rykaia is orchestrating behind the scenes and just no fucks given.
It is really cute. Like, 'cause obviously she like really cares for Maevyth. We really get that in this scene. Sisterhood and even just the fun that she wants to have with her. It's very cute that she's also like nudging these two together. Like, don't let her go anywhere. Like, I love this girl and like she'd be so great for you.
It does feel very like sleepover vibes. It's bringing me back to being innocent. Thinking of Maevyth and her life previously, it's really sad to think that she didn't have those times of innocence. She was just automatically from birth thought to be cursed. And so I'm sure a lot of kids didn't want to play with her and she probably never had any of those opportunities.
You got the feeling in this scene that like Maevyth was really having a hard time just letting herself have fun. Totally. And like Rykaia is this grown woman like jumping on the bed, and I really enjoyed that moment when she just kind of like let go and she has fun. And so the scene does continue. We've got more jumping on the bed actually. Zevander and Ravizio hear screaming and find the girls having a pillow fight and laughing their faces off. And then they notice the empty bottle of liquor, Ambrosia, the god's nectar as it's called. And they decide that this situation's gotten out of hand and someone needs to stay with Maevyth to make sure she's okay through the night. She's immortal. She's never had this liquor before. And I think Rykaia's warning is very fair. Meanwhile, Maevyth is rolling around in the bed sheets. She gets very seductive in her kind of drunken state. She's exposing her legs and filling the room with her sensual orange smell. And Ravizio, what a gentleman, offers to watch her, just in case she needs a little like relief through the night, perhaps. And Zevander responds very quickly. You so much as breathe across her neck, and I will take pleasure in skewering your skull before I set it aflame. Zevander keeps watch on Maevyth. That was a pretty easy decision. And he sits and he thinks to himself. He could feel the hunger, craving, and desperation rolling off her like a wild tempest. A beautiful and dangerous storm that he longed to wind himself inside. So Maevyth notices him sitting in the chair, even in her state. And he's watching her, and she calls to him, telling him how she aches. And he could have helped her and made her climax and kind of relieved some pressure, which would have caused her pain to subside. He refuses to touch her in this state. He recalls the first time he was given the liquor during his first moon cycle, and it was when he was enslaved, and General Lois bound his hands and then tortured him for hours, teasing him while he writhed in pain. While this is going on, Maevyth's escalating. Maevyth turns herself on the bed until her head is at the headboard. Her body rises from the mattress, lifted in the air, and the sheets that cover her fall away. Zevander is pretty startled. He walks toward her, finding her eyes rolled back and her body stiff as a plank and trembling like she's possessed by something. Her arms shake and her fingers curl and twist as if she's in pain. Then soft whispers, carried in the air, spoken in a language he recognizes, come to him. The language she once claimed not to speak, saying, "Give me pleasure." She sits up while remaining elevated, and she crawls toward him across the air, and he thinks to himself, what was this exquisite creature, this peculiar enchantress who stirred his soul? He stared at her in awe, mesmerized by her bewitching darkness. Now things get real steamy here. Maevyth takes things into her own hands, quite literally. Zevander raises his hand to a black flame that hovers above his palm and says, "Reveal yourself to me," in the god's language, trying to call at this demon that she's possessed by. Now Maevyth giggles and raises her hand, and the flame shoots from his palm to hers, as if she summoned it herself. He watches in fascination as the flame dissolves to smoke and then travels across her arm to her hands, turning her fingertips black. No one had ever been capable enough to snatch his power that way. Zevander couldn't tell if he was troubled or turned on. And she responds, "Give me pleasure, and I will give you life." So she begins touching herself, and we come to learn about the demon's little trick. Zevander can feel everything that her fingers feel, and he can command her from his mind. He has committed to not touching her until he can't resist anymore, and he grabs himself instead. And he notices that Maevyth can feel it too, and he begs her, "Come for me, my little moon witch." And a distant growl echoes in his ear, and he glances around to see shadows slipping in and out of the walls. The curtains shiver, and a gust of wind ruffles them. A rattling sound draws his attention to the candelabra overhead that trembles. The flames flicker, casting shadows across the underside of the canopy, and Zevander marvels at Maevyth's unfurling darkness, like peeling back the petals of a black rose. They both become utterly undone, and Maevyth collapses to the bed. Zevander observes her and notes that she was a vision of perfection. How greedily he desired her, his little moon witch. Tomorrow she would travel with Dolian to Calixar with the stones, where she would be safe and protected, far from the mages who hunted her, away from harm, and most importantly, away from him.
Holy
Now,
moly.
in case you missed it, that was actually the edited version. Like, a whole lot went on. If you forget, go back. It was quite a scene. Came out of nowhere. I did just want to have a moment for our consent king, shadow daddy tormentor Zevander, because he's like thirsting for her, but still manages to have morals. And he like wants her to be at his whim, cast his pain upon her, but he's like not evil. So we get like a completely mixed bag of the most morally gray male main character that I have ever seen.
I'm not embarrassed to admit that I reread that scene multiple times. It's so good. It was all very, very sexy until it started to seem a bit like a possession and the speaking in tongues. I didn't know whether to be horrified or aroused. It ended up being a little bit of both.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm obsessed. I feel like the author gave us so much here, and like they didn't even have to touch. It was just, again, it was this energy sex.
This is like a fully like a horror scene, I want to say. Like, even though she's enjoying herself, it is like we've got a demon somewhere in the mix. Like, good demon, bad demon. I don't know, but like she's possessed. So it was an experience.
It was an experience and a half.
Yeah.
Incredible.
I don't quite understand this demon. I mean, it was like, was it just like a convenience thing because she happened to have had that liquor, and so then any demon from the wall decided to like take her? I don't really know.
And the shadows slipping in and out of the walls.
Yeah.
Felt like Deimos getting some release potentially.
Maybe, yeah. Like, yeah, there was a lot going on. I really truthfully did not understand the choreography of like Maevyth's movements. Like, her head is here, her head is there, she's floating, she's turning, she's crawling in the air. I read it a few times and I'm like, still don't really get it, but it's okay. Like, we had a good time, so
In those situations, I just come up with something on my own to sate whatever desires come to mind.
Yes, that's exactly it. Oh my God.
Oh, so
Yeah.
good. Maevyth in the morning wakes up with absolutely no recollection
Good
of
for
the night
her.
before.
So convenient.
Amazing. You missed out on a lot, Maevyth.
Yeah.
If I was her, I would have been really pissed to have missed out on that. She heads to the training room only to find that Zevander isn't there. Instead, she runs into Rykaia, who asks her how she slept and once again calls her Bellatula. Rykaia mentions that Zevander is avoiding Maevyth because he's absolutely smitten with her. I don't think he knows what to do with you, Maevyth, which is exactly why I think you should go tonight, referring to the becoming ceremony that Maevyth is still unsure about. Dolian tells Maevyth he's leaving for Calixar and will be taking her with him. After asking about his promise to return to Elysia and him once again shutting her down, Maevyth is understandably pissed. She's also had a little bit of a change of heart about this becoming ceremony. So Maevyth finds Rykaia and tries to make a deal. If she goes with Rykaia to the becoming ceremony, Rykaia could return her to the forest afterwards. But Rykaia refuses, unwilling to put her in harm's way or accept that Maevyth has a home beyond Eidolon's keep. She says to Maevyth, "You don't understand. You will never understand because you can't. I have the power to take every sad day you've ever had and turn them into nothing more than a distant dream for you. Yet I cannot share my pain with you. I cannot show you the horrible things that live inside me. Things I have to live with. But since you've been here, I feel less burdened by them. So do not ask me to do this. I cannot be the one to see you off because the moment you leave is when my hell begins again." So sad. Poor Kaya. Maevyth responds, "Tell me what horrible things you've suffered, and I will do my best to take some of the pain. Every night I close my eyes. All I see are the horrible things they did to her, my beautiful mother. They forced me to hold her hand through it all. And I felt everything she felt. The fear, the humiliation, the hopelessness. I felt the apology. She apologized to me while they destroyed her, while they tore into her without a shred of remorse, until I finally felt her life fade. I was holding her hand when she died. It was Branimir who kept them from hurting me too. They tore away my clothes and they promised worse than what my mother suffered. I had no idea the kind of monster that lived inside my brother until I watched him and his spiders feast on those soldiers alive." Rykaia confesses her reason for attending the ceremony, connected to her brutal history with the Salassian soldiers, the same ones who won the tournament and will take Princess Kalisa's womanhood. Rykaia wants to protect her, knowing her mother is also gone. And with all of this out in the open, Rykaia finally agrees to take Maevyth to the forest after the ceremony. Maevyth mentions the mark she saw on her neck. Rykaia refers to it as her sigil, the symbol of her bloodline. Maevyth asks why it glowed the way it did, and Rykaia shares that hers glows when the moon hits it, or if she's feeling certain emotions. Maevyth's cheeks burn at the memory of fantasizing about Zevander at the time. They don their masks, Maevyth noting that hers has horns, and Rykaia shares that they represent the cicada who climbed out of the underworld with a message for the stag, convincing him to rape the goddess of fertility. It also represents the dawn of mankind, because the goddess gave birth to the sun and moon, the Salassians and Lunasir. The women wear cicada masks and the men wear stag masks. So it looks like Rykaia and Maevyth are going to the ball after all.
Oh my gosh. Will it be a Cinderella story, perhaps?
At least we finally find out how Lady Redain dies here.
Yes. Oh my God. We've been talking about her for weeks.
I mean, I knew she'd come back to
Yeah.
haunt us, pun intended. But it's also interesting that Branimir actually did save Rykaia in that situation. There's more information, I'm sure, on how that story unfolds.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we know that like there was a situation where he almost like strangled her to death. We're kind of getting these like mixed messages around Branimir. This one, he sounds like he saved her, but she's still afraid.
Yeah.
But then we also know there was like another situation, which I do have my doubts of like who started it because we know Rykaia is a little unreliable herself. I want to like Branimir. I want him to be like a nice little monster under the floor, but I don't know.
I also wanted to mention this Bellatula thing.
Hmm.
So Does Rykaia know a little bit more than what we're giving her credit for here? Or is it just a coincidence? Like, it's just so strange that she's calling her Bellatula, and that it's related to this story where a dancer gave their soul to a bad spirit. Whatever is going on with her and Morsana.
Mhm.
It's definitely some parallels there.
I like to think that she's, spinning the story in her mind to be a much more playful version of it, where, like, yes, Maevyth is Bellatula, and maybe Zevander is, like, the demon who takes her heart, which could be cute and romantic. Not in the real story. In the story, it's, like, terrible. But I don't know. I'm like, is Rykaia this just, like, jaded woman having fun with this, like, morbid story and placing Maevyth in it and almost like a Cinderella light?
I wouldn't be surprised. It's Rykaia.
I'm just worried she's like screwing with karma a little bit here, Like stop calling her like the demon girl and like just try to protect her a little bit, cuz like you're leading her right into the wolf's den. One thing that I caught when we were reading this part was when Rykaia talks about like the masks, the cicada and the stag, it kind of got my spidey senses tingling. So I did a bit of research, and there is like a Greek mythology connection here. It's not, point for point, but I think there are some kind of interesting connections. So in Greek mythology, Demeter and Aphrodite were the goddesses of fertility, which is what's referenced here. Now, Demeter was the sister of Zeus and was the mother of Persephone. And if you know your Greek mythology, Persephone married Hades, who is the god of the underworld, after being raped by Hades. And Persephone is also associated with growth, fertility, and love, and like the goddess of spring. So there's some tie-ins with this idea of like dawn and this kind of like morbid story around the cicada and the stag, and kind of like, I don't want to say objectifying, but like they're celebrating this female figure who in the story was raped. It's a very like harsh reality, which is very true to Greek mythology. So I think maybe Keri Lake is having a little bit of fun here playing with this story.
I'm convinced that she's taken a lot of like little inspiration from Greek mythology after you sharing all of these connections, because yeah, it definitely does ring true to me. It's also very creepy. Like,
Yeah.
this whole becoming ceremony actually makes me sick.
Oh yeah.
I mean, who knows? If I was invited to a fancy ball for a becoming ceremony, who knows whether or not I would actually attend? But for me right now, not in the story. I gotta say it's pretty nasty.
It's right on par with all the things in Foxglove. It does kind of have that like harshness of the Greek myths that we have heard, like the poor princess who we never talk about. We never talk about her. She doesn't really matter. I am kind of curious though, when you read this part, Kara, about them like preparing for the party and Rykaia coaxing her to go, did you have like alarm bells going off? Or were you feeling like this is just going to be like a lovely, sexy Maevyth Zevander meeting on the dance floor, kind of an exchange?
No, 100% alarm bells. I was like, what are you thinking? And I know Rykaia is this like fun, rebellious, impulsive person. Maybe she doesn't understand the full magnitude of what's at stake with Maevyth, but I found that wild. My heart was thumping in this part. I'm like, this is a bad idea. Like, my survival instinct is telling me hell no.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was having the same reaction, and I think like there's a bit of play going on here, because when they went into town and they get their dresses, like things like go pretty well. So Rykaia is able to kind of show that she's got some skills, she can wield her magic, but I think in your gut you're just like, no, like this is a bad idea. But of course they're gonna go, right?
Terrifying.
So Rykaia and Maevyth arrive at the event and they smuggle their way in. Rykaia uses her gifts to borrow some names from the attendance list. They enter a ballroom and notice that it's divided between the Salassians and the Lunaseer. Then they spot Zevander, and Maevyth is very worried that they are going to be found out. And so Rykaia tells her about a spell that can make him forget all of his anger, and she encourages her to whisper the words in his ear if things happen to go south. Now, they attract the attention of the Magistroli, and Rykaia tugs Maevyth toward them, apparently wanting to prove that their disguise is completely undetectable, even by the Magistroli. On the way, Maevyth notes a painting of an ethereal figure holding 2 orbs of light in his palms and feels a strange sense of familiarity as she studies the image. And then it's followed by a feeling of dread in the pit of her stomach. One of the unmasked Magistroli turns around and looks at them both, and Maevyth recognizes him as a scribe from Foxglove, the ones she saw at brunch with Moros. Maevyth wonders if he knows what happened to her sister. Rykaia and the mage then comment on this painting. Medjugorje, the god of alchemy and father of immortality, the embodiment of eternal life. As I understand, he was entirely obsessed with the goddess of death. Did he not imprison and rape her? Some believe as much. Others believe it was he who saved her. Her true lover was said to be the god of fear and destruction, Deimos. A second mage wanders over wearing a hood and a mask, along with an onyx ring on his finger. He's introduced as the Mage Lord Ekmiros. He compliments the whistle Maevyth wears around her neck, and not wanting to draw any attention to it, she tells him it's a family heirloom and she's quite protective of it. And he responds saying, "As you should be. Mine is an heirloom as well." Now, the ladies smartly leave the conversation and are wandering through the crowd before coming to an abrupt stop in front of a dark figure with angry eyes, staring down at them through a full-sized mask. Noticing how his eyes slowly trail up and down, taking in what Maevyth is wearing, he says, "What in 7 hells are you 2 doing here?" And Maevyth observes fury burned in Zevander's voice, and while it should have terrified me, I felt oddly titillated by it. Rykaia immediately blames Maevyth, saying this whole thing was her idea. And in a moment of panic, Maevyth remembers the spell. She rises on her toes and whispers it in his ear and then steps back. He shudders and rolls his shoulders back and then asks her if she's been drinking. Zevander commands Rykaia to take Maevyth back to the keep after the ceremony, knowing they can't leave without calling attention before then. Now, a contortionist starts performing and makes his way toward Maevyth, pulling a black rose with silver edges from the inside of his costume, just like the one she found inside the book. The crowd begins dancing. The beat is so powerful it vibrates her lungs. She searches the room and finds Zevander's gaze on her. He flicks his fingers, beckoning her to him. And Rykaia leans in asking, "Do you know how the scorpion chooses his mate?" By asking her to dance. It's happening. Oh my god.
I'm ready.
Okay, I'm ready. I love Rykaia. Oh my god. Okay. So she steps through the crowd toward him, very surprised that he's called her over. And she confesses she is not familiar with this dance, but he tells her to follow his lead. And he bands his arm around her waist and places his palm against hers. Through this dance, Maevyth confronts him about the trip to Calixar, asking if he wants her to leave. And he says no, but warns her how much trouble she's in. A lot more than she knows. She apologizes for sneaking out, and he tells her she's not the one that needs to apologize, knowing that it was Rykaia's doing. But she notes that he's angry with her, and she calls him on it, and he responds, "I am angry at you for wearing this dress, for looking so painfully exquisite. You've managed to draw everyone's attention, including mine." A strange magnetic energy simmered between us, with our gazes locked. His intensely evocative eyes, seen through the holes in his mask, somehow stripped me bare, as if I were the only person in the room, the sole object of his focus. The unspoken desire that lurked on the fringes thickened the air and stirred my pulse, forcing me to look away. And he says, "I curse Rykaia for bringing you here, and yet the thought of never having seen you in this dress is a torment in itself." Zevander.
The banter. The banter is so good, eh?
Yeah, we're getting all of it tonight. So Maevyth tells him about the mage that she recognized. And they have a little flirty banter. Zevander's jealous, and they have a little chat about it. She tells him how she knows him, and that she met him in Foxglove at brunch with Mr. Morose, who is the man that she was betrothed to. Zevander growls in his throat, wrapping her in his embrace, asking, "You're mated?" And she reassures him that she's not. But Morose has mines in Liberia and claims to know of a chasm filled with white stones. Zevander freezes and drags her away from the dance floor immediately. They continue their conversation and she confirms that the white stones were in fact Vivicantum. Zevander decides that he will speak with Anatolis, the mage, and agrees to ask about Maevyth's sister, Alicia. See, this is the thing. You give me the Bellatula story where you feel like is someone's heart going to get ripped out on the dance floor, but then you have this like lovely moment with these two, and the Scorpion King is asking her to dance, you know?
Right? Okay, I actually need to know, like, how much do you love Keri Lake's style of slow burn? Do you love it? Are you obsessed?
Yeah, I do love it. I mean, I don't have anything else to compare it to outside of this story. But between these two, like, I'm really a big character person. I like that we get the internal turmoil of Zevander having to kind of deal with his attraction to her and then him slowly, like, those walls just kind of crumbling away. And like, we know we're not going to get like the uber gushy softy guy. That's not who he's going to be, but he's kind of giving parts of that anyway, where he's willing to admit that although this whole situation is really screwed up and I don't know what you're doing here, I don't know that I regret it, you know?
The one thing I thought was weird is that Zevander is not in the first person, like his parts.
Yeah.
I would have really liked to see that.
Yeah, there's a few instances where I agree. Just trying to like gain the perspective of the situation. I think it would have been nice to get some more from his perspective. It's the same with Maevyth. It's not usually from her point of view unless she's reflecting on something. And so it can leave things feeling a little gray. Like, are we getting all the details?
It's probably could be on purpose, but I really like being able to like almost be transported into that person, that character's brain, and like kind of start thinking like them and feeling their emotions and almost kind of judging them on what they do next and what you might do. You know, I always think of myself as the character in books, but I honestly love Zevander and Maevyth. I love Keri Lake's style of slow burn so much. I feel like I've read so many romantasy books at this stage that sometimes I can just like read through scenes with a straight face now and be like, cool. That did nothing for me. But like, not Keri Lake. This shit, immaculate.
Yeah, and I will say, like, even though we aren't getting first person, there's a lot of it that kind of feels like you are. Like, you really are getting the evolution of the feelings and all the things that are going on. Like, even that scene with Rykaia and Maevyth, like, you're not getting a first person perspective, but you're still getting these moments of heartache where you really feel for Rykaia and all the things she's gone through and the fear that she has around losing Maevyth. And that's a skill for sure. So we're loving the ride. Let's talk about Magikai and whether or not he is the god of immortality, because I had a thought here. If we're introduced to the god of immortality, we've got the god of immortality, we've got the goddess of death. The god of immortality cannot die, correct? Would that not be the case? So maybe that's scary. But also, like, I wonder if he's never left. Maybe he's always been around because, you know, what would be the point of being the god of immortality if you weren't really immortal?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. It hasn't really been explained what his powers are, or like even any of the gods and how their names reflect in what they represent. So you might be right. Like, it hasn't been explained. Neither has the alchemy piece.
Yeah.
The god of alchemy and immortality.
We've gotten a lot of the lore and the background around like the Corvikai people and like Maevyth's origins roughly. But no, I agree. We're getting a little bit more in this section, but it's being like brought into a situation. It's not really being explained to us where they fit in. So I think that's interesting. I think there's also some connections between these gods and the heirlooms that come up. Because now, first of all, I feel like Maevyth fucked up. Can we talk about that for a second? Because she admits to this mage lord that she's got an heirloom, which it is an heirloom. It's an ancient heirloom of a whistle connected to her dragon bird. And I just wish that she hadn't said it, because as soon as he reacts and he's like, I've got an heirloom too, it's like she just completely exposed herself. And I think that she could have done better. And I really hope she figures out how to protect herself in the future while there's these crazy mage lords walking around with strange onyx rings that I think have to be real bad news.
She was already going against Zevander's wishes to be there, and she just puts it all out in the open like that. Terrifying. I don't know how many times that Dolian has had to tell her, like, people, if they get their hands on you, you're in trouble. Dolian has shared that much with her. So, like, come on, Maevyth.
It's like an event with like all of the high lords and all the people that you don't want to run into. I think she should have just put the whistle down her cleavage. Any smart woman would just shove it in between their boobs where no one's going to find it anyway. And if you need it later, then you've got it.
Fair. I like that. Maybe it was a catalyst for the plot to move forward.
Yeah.
But there was a lot going on there. It doesn't mean anything yet to me, though. Like, we're getting hints. I'm just not sure what to make of them. Like, the ring was called out.
Mm-hmm.
The heirloom.
Yeah.
Is it tied to another bloodline? Is it tied to Magicai? Was kind of my thought.
Mm-hmm.
And then Maevyth feeling this familiarity to the portrait.
Mm-hmm.
Terrifying.
Yes.
It's
I think
not in a good way.
No, I mean, my hope was in that moment she was getting a little bit of a warning from her friend Morsana, who seems to only really be able to reveal herself to Maevyth in certain situations when she's like open or like really focused or something, she can really come forward. But it felt like, yeah, maybe this is Morsana kind of nudging, like, that's the guy I keep warning you about. Stay away from him. And probably these other dudes are all connected, especially the guy wearing an onyx ring that to me made me think of the amulet that the king has. And maybe it's like a sister, like a counterpart to that same piece of jewelry tied to this like blight or, kind of like this apocalyptic pestilence that they've been talking about.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder. I do think there's a possibility that more than one piece of jewelry was made at this time. If we're getting any Akatar similarities, it could be connected to a spirit, potentially. We know people like to have souls that live inside of pieces of jewelry.
Yeah, there's just so much coming at us in this part. Even the contortionist, I was like,
yes.
Okay, who are you working for? Like, what is happening here?
Yeah, where'd you get this rose? Like, how does everyone just have silver brimmed roses everywhere?
Yeah, and like, he must know about Maevyth. So, yeah, it's just a lot, and there's still so much that we need to uncover here.
There's something with the black rose. It's too much of a coincidence for it to appear in these very important scenes over and over again. It feels like an element of foreshadowing that Keri Lake is using. I just don't quite know how yet, because it seems to appear sometimes in like a moment of like prophecy or like the evolution of the meaning behind Maevyth, but then it occurs in these sorts of scenes where it feels like a bad.
It is, I feel like it's on purpose. I feel like it's all meant to leave us going down all of these different paths, and then something else is presented to us and we're shifted and we're like, well, wait, actually, maybe it could be this. And we're just creating this web of mysteries that's just making it so much more overwhelming and hard to decipher what is being maybe put there to distract us.
Yeah, we've got first book energy here, and I am just really glad that we get 3 of them because it makes a lot of sense. And I kind of love this uncomfortable feeling of a first book where you are picking up on all of these things and there's just no way to know where it's going to go, and that's a very fun place to be in a story. So I'm enjoying the confusion. Let's just embrace it.
Even just buying the book and looking at the map, you were right. There is a map and it's massive. I was expecting to see like Aethyria and Mortasia and maybe, like a couple of the other areas like the Umber Vale. But no, there's way more to it than what I had originally thought. And I was like, how is Keri actually going to reference and touch on all of this throughout the book? Like, where are we traveling elsewhere? I'm happy that there's going to be 3 books and that there's a little bit more to this story than what Keri like originally had planned for.
We've got a map and we've got a glossary. And we've got 3 books. So
Yes,
buckle up.
buckle up. Maevyth and Rykaia end up in a conversation around sex and virginity, and Rykaia learns that Maevyth is a virgin. Rykaia explains the moon cycle and how it affects Zevander. Rykaia is really just setting up Maevyth and Zevander perfectly here. She says, imagine your body insisting on fucking more hours of the day than not. All lunar men suffer the dreaded moon cycle, which is why we have such a bountiful population and far more Nilivir than any other country. Now, this is interesting because I love that men are now succumbing to a moon cycle rather than women. Like that's a revelation that I can get behind.
Yeah.
100%. Rykaia comments on the jealousy that she picked up on from Zevander and Maevyth's interaction and the way that Mage Anatolis looked at Maevyth. Yet since you've arrived, I've seen a side of him that I didn't know existed. I believe it's called lust and a severely besetting attraction, but what do I know? I'm just his annoying little sister who's lived with him for nearly 2 centuries. I don't know how Keri Lake does this. And there is just a lot of horrifying stuff happening, a lot of this gothic darkness coming in. And then we've got another element that's just this like wholesome, fun, sort of back and forth banter. And those are just the 3 elements. Like there's also sex, there's emotion, there's sadness. There's just so much to this book. I don't know how she's able to bring all of those elements together and for it not to feel fragmented and weird. Yeah. But yeah, it just feels like a full-bodied story. And a lot of times that falls flat for me in other books.
I agree. And she's doing it in how big is the book? Like 650? Like it's not a 900-page book, which I think is very difficult to do. Just the length of our episodes alone, not that they're anything crazy, but they are a testament to the quality of the writing and the detail that's being written in, where we just can't show up and not share things that feel important.
Imagine none of it's important at the end and we just look crazy.
There's longer podcasts out there. Deeper dives.
There's deeper dives. Oh my goodness, that's funny. Zevander leaves Maevyth's side and runs right into General Lois, the woman who tortured him as a young boy before he understood his power. She pervs on him. This is actually a really weird, disgusting part, and attempts to intimidate Zevander. But all it does is serve to irritate him. She taunts him by speaking about Maevyth and what she would do to her. Gross. He pulls his blade and holds it to her throat, threatening to carve her eyes from their sockets if she even looks at her. She catches sight of Maevyth again. She was chaos wrapped in fine silk, the embodiment of trouble that had nearly brought him to his fucking knees when he'd first laid eyes on her across the ballroom. So achingly beautiful his chest hurt, and those words she'd whispered earlier, asking him to take her and essentially ravish her. Clearly she hadn't known what she was saying or asking of him, and her accent was a bit rough, which had struck him as odd given the ease with which she'd spoken in the language the night before. So now we know Rykaia's a little sneaky.
You fell for it, Maevyth. You keep falling for all the tricks.
Right? Yeah. Although I will say I would have drank that Nectar of the Gods liquor, whatever that was.
Fully. Yeah, it sounded delicious too. So.
Right? Zevander grabs Maevyth and they follow Anatolis outside. Zevander corners the mage and questions him, torturing him with his scorpions until the mage admits that he was sent to Mortasia by the Magistroli to confirm the presence of a vein. He admits that Cadavros is alive and aware of the vein. The Magistroli lied about his death because they were following orders from Akmiros. The mages banished Cadavros without knowing that the vein was there. It had been dead for millennia, buried beneath the Liverian mountains, and was recently discovered by a man named Moros. Zevander asks what the Magistroli's plan is, and the mage says to destroy Cadavros and strengthen the Unravel, only possible by securing the Septimir. Zevander asks about Alicia's banishing ceremony, and the mage confirms that he was there. She emerged with Mr. Morose, but she's unsure if she's still alive. He confirms that tonight, Rykaia had been set up, and they knew the 2 of them had arrived at the event as soon as they pulled the names from the list. It was all a setup, a hope that Zevander had found the mortal for the last stone and that she might show up tonight. But before the mage can answer any more questions, he starts puking organs and dies a quite horrific death. Chaos fully erupts at this part, and Zevander tells Maevyth to run and find his sister and cleave back to Eidolon's keep.
Get out of here, Maevyth. It is not going to be good from here out.
Damn. Things coming together, so much happening here. And again, the Septimir and everything that it can or can't do is so extremely vague. We're just being told right now that it can strengthen the Umbra Veil, cure Zevander's curse. Like, what aren't we learning? What can't it do at this point?
Well, true. I mean, I think what we're not talking about is that clearly the Septimir has some way of bringing Cadavros back into his power. That is the motivating force that we haven't been talking about until we get these mage dudes to really admit to their dark side of this whole story.
It feels like the mages know prophecies very similar to what Dolian has shared. So are they having these similar visions as Dolian?
It got me wondering, some of your thoughts around Dolian. Maybe he really is behind all of this. I still think that he is meaning well, but I do kind of think it's maybe his fault. And if he was such a valuable mage at one point, then maybe he did have this vision and share it. And now it's kind of on him that everyone's after the Septimir that has this power and ability to wield Sablefyre.
Part of me tells me that Dolian's in on it, and the other is that maybe he's not. And I want to believe that he's pure at heart and he wouldn't actually go down that road. But yeah, I do feel like there's two similar stories. But another thought that I had was like, could the Magistroli actually want Cadavros dead? To your point of them like having a grander plan with him, I just keep thinking like, could it possibly go against their agenda, right? Like he was kicked out originally for doing blood magic, like the demutomancy, right? And so maybe it's not the Magistroli, but the king that wants him alive. Because remember that bargain?
Yeah.
That, again, we don't know if it's a bargain, but the amulet that the king has that's protecting his son, the prince, could potentially have to do with why Cadavros is alive. So that's kind of my thought. Like maybe the Magistroli actually do want him dead.
I mean, I really like that theory. The only thing I don't understand then is why are they going looking for this vein? Because they don't really need it then. They need to know if Cadavros is alive, which they know he's alive. They wouldn't really need the Septimir because Cadavros doesn't have magic unless he has somehow figured out a way to get to this vein. It sounds like Cadavros is alive. There is a vein. He knows about the vein, but we don't know what he's doing with this vein yet. I don't know. It's like the chessboard is all building and the actions are not happening yet. So we can't really see anyone's clear motives yet.
Right.
But it got me thinking about the king too. Like I thought the king was lying about the fact that he thought Cadavros was dead. This scene made me think like maybe he really does think that he killed him. Obviously the king, being a king, is not going to kill him himself. And so if he sent the Magistroli to kill Cadavros and then they just didn't and they sent him away in case they needed him later, then the king wouldn't know any different.
True.
Maybe he is being honest from that regard, but I still don't get why they would keep Cadavros alive unless they had kind of this master plan to bring him back. And that's what my gut is telling me by these like weirdo Magistroli people who also are setting each other up with curses where they puke up their organs if they say things. Like they're giving like evil vibes for sure. Their agenda is not good. So yeah, I'm not sure.
All we can do is speculate at this stage.
Yeah.
Like I keep changing my mind about so many things that occur here. I'm like, wait, I have this new piece of information. And it's steering me down this totally different path. And then I get overwhelmed and I'm like, maybe I'm just an idiot. Like maybe none of this makes sense.
Now, I did catch something here. The whole thing around Maevyth being a virgin. There's just some like not great history again with virgins and Greek mythology and kind of like For really a lot of stories, often the virgin becomes a sacrifice. And so it's just kind of got me down this path again about anathema and a sacrifice. And we've got our virgin. And in Greek mythology, the virgin goddess represents a powerful, independent female figure who's not bound by the constraints of marriage or male dominance, but they are often taken. They're often taken and they're often sacrificed. They are just kind of revered. And so I would be lying if I said there is not kind of an aura around Maevyth. It just hasn't really been brought to the surface, this aspect of it. And also the connection to virgins and like power, because that tends to be a thing in fantasy, is like having this pure individual who then comes into their power, and then they might be kind of thrust into the middle of a situation and be used as a bit of a pawn between the good side and the bad. So it is making me again nervous for Maevyth. I don't think she's in a good situation, and unfortunately Rykaia is kind of to blame for throwing her into this mess, and now everything's going to shit once again.
It's very possible that Maevyth could be the virgin sacrifice here. I feel like she's been a sacrifice multiple times throughout this book. She hasn't really had her own agency in anything up to this point. I would love to see her become like this crazy badass and say, fuck that, kill everybody that tries to get in her way of creating her own agency, but remains to be seen.
Maybe she just needs to lose her virginity and then she can really come into her power and like people will leave her alone. Wouldn't that be nice?
I mean, does the bedroom scene count?
I don't know. There was really no touching. So things are getting chaotic at the event. Maevyth follows Rykaia. They're on strict orders to leave, and she watches Zevander disappear. And then she hears a voice inside her head telling her to stay with him, that she's safest with him. But she doesn't listen. Instead, she follows Rykaia and Torin, one of the other Letalese that Zevander trusts, and Rykaia cleaves through a wall. But before Maevyth can join her, she is caught by a robed figure who takes her whistle and then drugs her, and then she passes out. She wakes up and she's in a room surrounded by candles and robed figures. It seems to be like some sort of maybe sacrificial offering situation that's going on. Her arms are shackled in copper. She's unable to move her feet, and she notices a black flame writhing beside her, almost seeming starved and restless, reaching out for anything to consume. The purple-robed mage speaks, saying, "Behold, the last daughter of the Corvacae, a contradiction to all we represent, the father of alchemy, of life, magic, and creation, and the daughter of death and decay. Her blood, when turned to stone, will bring forth the truest alchemical transformation. Through her death we shall live. By her essence we shall fortify the Unravel to protect against our enemies, to drive away disease and famine, as is prophesied by the divine goddess of foresight. Together with the 6 stones we've yet to reclaim, we will not fall prey to the black pestilence. Magicae, Lord of alchemy and knowledge, we call upon your wisdom and skill to tame the Sablefyre, the force you created, so that we may carry forth your incorporeal spirit." A feminine voice speaks inside of Maevyth's head. "Come forth, god of alchemy, give me your strength." And she notices the mage's black onyx ring. And the mage lord speaks again, saying she will burn in Sablefyre, and her blood shall turn to stone. The stone shall grant us immunity from the blight. Now he passes his hand through the flame, scooping the fire into his palm, and then slaps his hand over her mouth, forcing the fire down her throat. A silvery glow appears in her periphery, creating a haze over her eyes. The flame burns as it crawls down her throat into her chest. She arches her back and screams, the darkness in her vision pulling her deep. Then a voice, again, saying, "It's all right, Maevyth. Come to me. Do not let them see your fear." The room shrinks until she's in complete blackness, and she notices Morsana. "He searches for me," she says, and lifts her gaze as if something hovered above them. "He wants to destroy you. You command the flame. Remember that. Let the flame do your bidding. Go before it's too late." Now she opens her eyes and she stares at the mage, and something dark and scaly moves inside her chest, and a cold sensation burrows into her skin and bones. She closes her mouth and blows a torrent of black flame at the mage lord's face. Maevyth struggles to fight the mages. She's pushing through the pain, and everything turns to darkness again. In the quiet of my mind, I saw a vision of myself, dancing in a meadow of white mist and asphodels, my long dark locks bouncing around my shoulders. How peculiar and unsettling to see myself, as if I were looking through the eyes of someone else. The distant echo of my twin's laughter brought a smile to my face. She twirled among the tall white flowers before she paused to look back at me, the smile in her face sobering to fear. What did you do? The horror of her expression darkened, and cold dread crawled over my spine. What did you do? She opens her eyes to screams and notices something at the exit keeping them from leaving. A black wall of flame circles the room, forming a barricade, and the metallic cuffs had melted away from her wrists and ankles, setting her free. Shortly after, a silver blue light glimmers over top of the altar where she lay moments before. Rykaia and Dolian appear on the other side of it. Dolian encourages her to command the flame and create a passage. Soldiers appear, and Dolian is able to hold them off with a ward before they cleave, until Melantha appears. And she makes it clear she's only interested in taking Maevyth. The other two can go. But Dolian warns her she's making a grave mistake, and the Septimir will not prevent the inevitable. But Melantha responds, saying, "Yet it was you who raved about it for years. It was you who led the charge to turn her blood to stone, was it not? You sent Zevander to kill her." But Melantha admits that she has no intentions of turning her blood to stone, suggesting that she just wants to return her to Mortasia, to her sister. Maevyth hears the voice of the ghost she saw at Eidolon's keep, saying, "Do not believe him." Melantha makes it clear that Maevyth has very little choice, and draws a line down the wall with her finger, showing a view of her sister pacing back and forth. Dolian warns her again that it's not real and she shouldn't go with her, but Melantha gives her a choice: go to her sister or stay and risk capture by the Salassians. Maevyth agrees, and Melantha promises to let Dolian and Rykaia go free. I really liked this part. Okay, we just had this whole conversation about her being the Blessed Virgin, and I really do think she was being set up to be the ultimate sacrifice. That was definitely the vibe of the scene. But then she comes out and she's like, chaos. Like, she is giving the chaos energy. She's like wielding fire. And I just love that the female main character in this story is someone who really has balance between these feminine and like ethereal elements while being like this chaotic, demon driven, fire wielding woman. And so I just have a moment of appreciation for Keri for giving us such a badass FMC.
We haven't gotten much of Maevyth's magic. Like, we've gotten her doing these like little things with her glyphs, but we've seen really nothing bad bitch wise. I want to start to see her going from this like, I'm cursed, I'm tiny, I don't know, and into this like, fuck yeah, I have powers and watch out, don't fuck with me.
Yeah, I'm gonna blow black flame in your face.
Yes.
Like, I love that. Like, that whole thing, for a minute I thought she was like channeling Raivox, like that reference to like a dark scaly creature. Now obviously she was like wielding Sablefyre, but it did feel like there was a dragon Corvagon kind of energy going on, and I kind of thought that we were gonna see silver flames coming out of her mouth, and we didn't, but it did really feel like a connection there between her animal.
The one thing I was confused about is when she says, "Come forth, god of alchemy." Like, why would she want that? Like, is that Morsana speaking? Did Magikai not imprison her, or is she taunting him? Like, that was interesting for me. I was like, wait, what? Do we like him now?
Right. I know. I found it very confusing. Even in the ballroom scene where like they run into the mage, they're looking at the painting, they're talking about kind of like the different versions of the story. Like, in one version he was good, and in one version he was bad, and Deimos is kind of just there. So it does have me feeling very confused about what we're supposed to think. In this ceremony, it seems like they're trying to resurrect Magekai, and the mages don't seem like their will is good. Like, even Melantha in this scene, I found it all very like confusing, but I'm like, you're taking her into the woods with this Mr. Morose beast man, who I think is Cadavros, who's been seen walking around with his sister, and I just have to assume that he also wants Maevyth. Like, everyone's after her for not good intentions. So if they're trying to summon him in this ceremony, I don't think he's a good guy.
Right? Yeah, it is. It's all so confusing.
She said something like, he searches for me. And so I think she was referencing Mage Kai, but it kind of seemed like Morsana thinks that someone's been possessed by him, maybe. Like that the presence is there, because while they're trying to summon him, it does seem like she keeps warning Maevyth about him. And so I gotta say, I read this part and I was thinking, maybe Kara's onto something with her Dolian theory. Because like at the beginning of the book, wasn't there stuff about like Dolian? Dolian's unreliable, and I keep thinking there was a part with him having like a drinking problem or something. And so it made me wonder, like, could there be like a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde thing where like maybe Dolian is like possessed by this like old immortal spirit, and like maybe during the day he's got his like moral compass turned on, but then if he's like taken over by Mage Kai, maybe he sees visions, and that's why they weren't reliable, because they were with like his agenda, not Dolian's agenda. I just think that it's possible that maybe the confusion we're feeling is reality, and he's being presented with visions just like Maevyth is. Like, we're taking these visions to be real that she's experiencing, so why not him? Maybe that's kind of what made him into like such a big deal.
I know. That's what I was thinking too. And like with this do not believe him thing, this part actually kind of like got me thinking, like it just made me think twice about Dolian being involved, because again, what does that, like, who is that alluding to again? And so seeing that it seems in this situation the Magistroli are trying to resurrect Magicae, the visions that Dolian was having could be Magicae, or similar to what the other mages are experiencing. Maybe the other mages are seeing these same visions from Magicae, but it seemed like Dolian kind of had his own agency and somehow does want to get her away from these mages. Is that for his own benefit or not? Is Dolian doing this because he has like a higher purpose and like is actually experiencing visions from Magicae, and maybe the Magistroli aren't? They're both like trying to work in the vision of Magicae, but Dolian is the one with the insider info because he's actually the one possessed. Right. And the Magistroli are kind of like twisting what Magicae actually wants into their own, based on their own interpretation.
I think we have some like unreliable characters in here, and I agree. It's like we're getting these bits and it's very hard to know what to do with them. I don't really know why Dolian originally was hunting for the Septimir. It's kind of presented to us like him and Zevander went on this mission together, but like we don't even know how those two found each other. If Dolian had learned about the Septimir, what was his purpose beyond Zevander? We know Zevander's motivation. We don't know why Dolian was even like thinking about or like propelling this idea forward without Zevander, and it doesn't feel right that it's like all Zevander. That doesn't seem like something Dolian would care for. He seems to be focused on like a much greater purpose. So it does have me questioning, like, how did he get down the path in the first place? And what were those intentions? Like, were they good? Were they bad?
We may never know.
Yeah, it's not looking great for those answers. No. What did you think about the vision of like the girl in the field and Maevyth? Like, I was trying to figure, like, is this like a resurrection thing? Is it like an alternate universe? Or like, does Maevyth have a twin? Or like, did she have a twin at some point? Like, she's like looking at herself through someone else's eyes. So it could have been someone else. But the assumption in the way it's described is that she's not actually looking at Maevyth because she calls her a twin. And obviously she has no recollection of this experience. So like, what the hell is going on there?
No, this pissed me off. Like, I have enough to think about Keri Lake, and I have to think about a fucking twin. Like, what? Like,
yeah.
What? This came out of nowhere for me. The way that it was described was this white mist, these white flowers that kind of contrast with Maevyth's darkness. So I thought, like, could it just be a metaphor, right? Yeah. Like, we've been getting this dark side of Maevyth. It's like a duality between her light and darkness, like this yin and yang kind of vibe, potentially. Maybe not. Maybe it's literal and she has a twin and we're just being thrown this piece of information. It shook me. I'm like, Pardon?
I know. It really threw me off too. I was like, is this like Morsana when she was younger? The thing at the very end of the vision where it's like, what did you do? What did you do? That very much confused me, because then Maevyth comes back to reality and she's like, she set herself free. Like, she did what she needed to do. If it had to do with what was going on in reality and like, what did you do? You killed all these people. Like, good.
I don't know if I have a reliable theory at this point.
Yeah, it was a lot to throw in there at the end.
Yeah, but who knows? Maybe it'll start to come together and make a little bit more sense towards the end. While all of this crazy Maevyth chaos is happening, Zevander saves Prince Dorjan from his chambers and the battle, returning him to the king, who he finds drinking with the Selassian king and queen. The prince challenges his father, blaming him for the unrest in the city. The king uses a false name, Lyric, to cover for Zevander in front of the Selassians. He's excused and finds himself down a corridor before hearing voices. He turns to Shadow, finding Captain Zevant and General Lois, overhearing a rather important conversation. He learns that the soldiers have taken both his sister and Maevyth and plan to take the other stones from Zevander. Through the conversation, he learns that the king chose not to destroy Cadavros, and that Cadavros now has access to the vein, giving him a bounty of Sablefyre and Vivicantum to power himself with. They make a comment here about the Corvicae people and the possibility of them being immune to the pestilence, and ask if an elixir can be made to prevent the spread. Interesting. Zevander, cloaked in shadows, follows the captain, reflecting on how badly things have turned so quickly, and reminds himself why he tried so hard to stay away from Maevyth in the first place. In his world, the slightest show of affection for someone served as a dangerous bargaining chip, and the less Zevander had to barter for, the better. Zevander finds himself in the altar room Maevyth had been taken to. Black flames still covering the walls and piles of ash on the floor. Tucked under the Mage Lord's robe lay an object Zevander recognizes, the whistle that Maevyth had worn earlier in the night. He knelt down and pocketed it, scanning for any other evidence of her. I'm glad he pocketed it because I was actually worried about the whistle.
Me too. We just got Raivox back. I swear, if we have to wait a whole other book.
Imagine if Zevander decides to blow the whistle. I know you did in like one of the first episodes say, how come the egg hatched when Zevander came to visit? So maybe he is Daddy Zevander to Raivox.
There was something in the Allura Maevyth conversation about the Corvigon and how they didn't typically like ride those dragons. And so I'm like really hoping that they defy all odds and Zevander can just ride Raivox and save Maevyth.
Zevander finds his way through the ward Dolian left behind, finding Rykaia and Dolian. Dolian demands he go after Maevyth, but Zevander refuses, desperate to protect his sister. As if he refused, Dolian, exasperated, yells, "Fuck it all, you stubborn bastard. She's your mate, Zevander. I saw it in a vision. She wore your sigil, the mark of your scorpion, as did your son. I saw it before I sent you to kill her. The vision of you joining Cadavros arrived after I'd sent you to retrieve the stone. And it was then I realized that killing her gave you nothing to live for, nothing to fight for. And such a thing would put every one of us in peril. I made a grave error. It's why you couldn't kill her and why the black flame refuses to take her life." Chills, chills. This part was wild.
Dolian, we knew you were holding back.
Right? Like, what else are you keeping from us, Dolian? Rykaia awakens and yells, it's her, telling Zevander that Melantha is the Flamelian who hurt her and the other sex cells. She begs him to go save Maevyth. Zevander asks Dolian where to go, and he tells him that he knows where. He cleaves a second portal into the wall, looking in on the eating woods. The echo of Dolian's words sunk beneath his muscles and bones, stirring the beast that longed to claw out of him. A possessive and vengeful creature that urged him to stake his claim. Soldiers fired arrows at him while he stepped through the portal. After his mate. After his mate!
Oh my god.
And that's it. That's the end of part 2.
It's everything I wanted it to be.
That was like the biggest chunk of the book. That's my one qualm, Keri Lake. It was very tough for us to organize these episodes around the parts that are so very different in size and content.
Please let us love on your books in a much more like evenly paced part in future.
But this part was amazing. Like I was so pumped to to start covering this part. Wow, a lot happened. We know that they're mates.
I love a good mate story. And now Zevander can't deny it. And so finally, we have a little honesty here. We've got
Right.
some meaning behind all of these feelings and weird urges and magic sharing and things. And so, like, go get her. Go get her, Zevander.
Go get your mate. When you asked about the map in my book,
Yeah.
there is a map. But I
Okay.
started to look back in the book, in the glossary of the gods and everything that's laid out there. I was triggered by this word pestilence because I believe Dolian called it a plague. It's been called a blight, and it's now been called a pestilence. And so I went back into the glossary and I found Pestilos, the god of pestilence and famine. So there is a god associated to this.
Which is like also associated. I don't think the god is associated with mortals, but it's like one of the things they've talked about when they talk about like not going over to Mortasia is because it's filled with famine and disease.
Interesting. I did not catch that part. You're right, though. And yeah, because I remember the guards didn't want to touch Maevyth. So interesting. So I don't know how he's related, but I also saw, and this is something that makes me very afraid because there's mention of Zevander having a son, right? And probably Maevyth. And on this glossary journey, I was reminded that there is also a goddess of fertility. She is very real. And so what could that mean? Like there's two possible gods. Well, we haven't even met Magicka yet. And there's two other gods that are mentioned in the front of this book that we have no idea about.
If we get like a full-on god war, like it's probably going to be bad, but I think I'm going to love it. Like, I want all of these gods to just stop hiding behind visions and dreams and alcohol and just present yourself and just like tell us who you are and what you want.
I know. Yeah, because like at this point, I'm going nuts. Like, I am grasping at straws here. Like, is the twin Morsana's twin? Like, I'm all over the place with all of my
Right.
theories and thoughts about it. My head is fully spinning. I'm hoping that we get a little bit more clarity in this next part of the book. I think we will. We have to, right?
I mean, I hope so. I think there's 90 pages left. It's not a ton, but Keri like does a lot in a little bit of time. I have heard that it ends on a cliffhanger, but I also don't know that I don't interpret a cliffhanger in the way that everyone else does all of the time. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I hope there is some sort of end point to the story that feels complete enough, although it's obviously not going to be the whole story.
I wanted to touch on this idea that Maevyth kind of saved Zevander. He doesn't like to get attached, and something about bartering, like the less he has to barter for, the better. And then Dolian shares in the next breath how important Maevyth has been to his growth and not slipping into the darkness with Cadavros. So I thought that that was kind of interesting. And we're starting to see with Zevander, even in the beginning, like succumbing to his curse and self-harming in the bath and like moping around like a sad man, and how much he's changed with Maevyth. I just think that's kind of cute.
I agree. I think there's like a lot of growth going on and a lot of opening himself up and forcing Zevander to be vulnerable in ways that he is definitely not comfortable with. I think he's finding a way to be vulnerable around his feelings and allowing himself to act the way that he is feeling drawn to with Maevyth. But it's a whole other thing when you let yourself love someone and you're in this crazy mixed up world and everyone wants to kill that person. And like that's a scary space to be in, to have your feelings all tied up in this person. And I think that we might see a little bit of that as we get into part 3, because now Zevander has some information that he's probably known and now he can't deny it. And that does put him in a very vulnerable position.
We've seen a lot of the like spicy, angsty arousal between the two of them, but I'm really excited to see more actual bonding, like some love, like, some like friendship, and
Yeah.
like let's get the lover boy thing going for Zevander.
Yeah, I'm with you. I am also like on a whole other page though, to be honest. Like my brain is going to like how unsettled Zevander gets when someone looks at Maevyth and these people have taken her. And they have taken her into the woods, and I just want Zevander to unleash on these people and like show us exactly how dark this guy is.
Hell yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
think we're 100% going to get that. It sounds like they're going to the Eating Woods. We knew that they would come back.
Face off with the woman who like fucked Rykaia up, first of all. So like that, you know, we've got a couple strikes immediately. Like Zevander's got a lot of ammunition going into this what is it called? The cleaving that he's going into. He's got a lot of ammunition to just go all out on these people. He's going to come face to face with Cadavros, the only other person, we'll call him, that knows how to wield Sablefyre. I'm kind of scared of that as well, because I think that Cadavros would like nothing more than to be face to face with Zevander. I think there's been a bit of warning around when they get together what might happen. Mm-hmm. But I think Zevander's got his sights set right on Maevyth, where they need to be.
Where are they going in the Eating Wood?
I swear the Crone Witch better show up. But also, we want her to be safe. Like, I want her to be safe, but True. I feel like she's close by.
I hope we were right about the Crone Witch showing back up, because I need it so badly.
If she saves the day, I'll be so happy. Do you think she knows about the baby? About the vision of the child? They have to continue the bloodline.
I need to know what you think of this, because right now I'm not seeing how Cadavros is involved in any of this. And so I started to think about it, and like, maybe this is ridiculous, because I've been very like, Dolion can't be trusted, and maybe he's a manifestation of Magicae. But Magicae, alchemy, and immortality. When I think of alchemy, I think of transforming things. And Cadavros was using demutomancy and the blood, like this blood-altering magic, plus Sablefyre, which to me sounds alchemical. It almost sounds like something that Magicae could get behind.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there's been talk about him possessing someone potentially. Like, could it be Cadavros? I'm just not seeing how he connects to the larger sphere of the gods.
Cadavros is like a real mystery. I don't know how to connect Cadavros to the gods. I think we really just don't know a lot about him. I think about his connection to the king and the Magistroli. That's really where my brain goes to first, because I kind of feel like the whole blood magic thing is like all a lie. I think something went down. Cadavros was valuable, then Cadavros became a threat. This is my theory. And that when he became a threat, they had to get rid of him. And that was probably what the king wanted. The king got what he wanted from Cadavros, which was protection. And then we've got the Magistroli, who seem to be like really sure that there is going to be this like famine and this pestilence. Interestingly enough, that's exactly what's tied to this amulet and the death of the son. It feels like there's a power struggle, and it's feeling like it could be very realistic that the Magistroli want to overthrow the king, and they would like to get rid of the king, and they would like to get rid of the son, but they know that if they do that, that there are consequences. And so then, can they protect everyone? Can they use the Septimir? Maybe they want to put Cadavros in a position of power and bring him back for whatever reason. I don't know. I think the big missing piece is that God piece, because that feels like something that would fully tip the scales if that is what they're trying to do.
It feels like we're on the precipice of something so big right now, and it's so easy to just like keep drawing conclusions. I don't think we have all the information. I'm hoping at least we can tie up some loose ends before the end of this book, because I don't know how long we're gonna have to wait for Eldritch.
Yeah.
I might actually go nuts. I just don't understand how this is going to come to a conclusion. Like, I have no idea. I will be very upset if it's like a major cliffhanger and we don't get any of this mystery resolved. Like, I need something for my serotonin to like level out.
Yeah, we need something, especially because we don't have a date. Yeah. Here's like a really random thought that I just popped into my head. What if Melantha is the one who is possessed by Magicae? And so that's why in that scene, that voice was coming to Maevyth and saying, don't trust him, because like she is the evil spirit of this old god, and she has woven her way into the Magistroli. There was something when Zevander met her and they did that whole like truth serum thing. It was so different to have like a woman in the Magistroli. Like, how did this come to be? I haven't really like worked through that theory fully, but it could be plausible.
It could be. I was wondering that too. It didn't really feel natural for this voice of Morsana to be like, don't trust Dolian in that moment, but then it doesn't explain all of the other moments that we've gotten.
No.
It could allude to Dolian or Zevander. When Maevyth has that connection with Morsana, we don't know what that specific connection is, but maybe it's in those moments where there is a pathway between the two of them that Morsana can just get in there and warn her. And maybe it's just been about Magicae.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a rhyme or reason, or maybe it wasn't because she just finished talking to Dolian or just being with Zevander. Maybe it is a little bit more simple than that.
It could be, because the other thing is that when Melantha and Zevander had their exchange, you know, out by like the Snake River by the king's court or whatever, she like recognizes his Sablefyre. Like she just seems to be able to see through him and see his magic. And it again doesn't really make sense. The Mage Lord doesn't appear to have that same ability. So it does seem like there's more going on. And the Flamelian thing, like that feels like a misalignment to the female characters that we've presented with so far. It felt like a male character when they talked about the Flamelian, and then for her to appear, it gives off like a Dark Lord vibe.
It's a good point. It's a good point. I'm tucking this into the back of my mind for the rest of the book. I'm gonna have all of our theories and notes up. We cannot lose track of these theories at the end of the book and at the very end of the series. I think we should debunk some of this or see where we were on the right track. I think that would be really fun.
We need to build the serial killer wall and then revisit it and pull it off thread by thread. Okay, just to wrap things up, because this is a big old beast of a section here, we're gonna allow ourselves the privilege of a little bit of prophesizing ourselves, because this is like the first episode where we have not had to keep our lips so tight. We do not know where the book goes and where it ends. So let's talk about Maevyth. As she begins to uncover her connection to Sablefyre and her pivotal role in the prophecy, she faces challenges to her autonomy and her identity. How has she evolved from the beginning of the story to this point? And do you think she'll ultimately embrace her power, or will the external forces attempting to control her push her to reject it?
Loaded. Well, firstly, I don't think she's going to reject it because it's arousing to her.
True.
But yeah, she's totally evolved. I feel like it's a story of like a woman embracing all aspects of herself. A lot of us can almost relate to that, as not even just as women, but just as human beings, like feeling not necessarily right or having these insecurities. Her time in Mortasia could even be compared to like negative self-talk. You know, we've got everyone telling her that she's not good enough, she's strange, she's not like everybody else, she's cursed. And so that's all she's come from, and that's all she's known. And then there's this theme of oppression in Foxglove. And so coming to Aethyria, she's actually the one that's special, and she is getting this extra attention. And for once, she does have, you know, a really healthy relationship with Rykaia. She's learning more about her potential past, you know, putting together some of those pieces of her ancestry rather than feeling alone. It's her coming into her own power as a woman and as somebody who has been put down and oppressed her entire life. I'm seeing her sort of challenge some of the beliefs that she might have fell into, or the narratives that came from her time in Mortasia. That was kind of seen in when she was trying on those new dresses, and those thoughts were coming to her about trying to be modest. Those thoughts aren't really hers. Those are things that she's just been taught to believe by the society she grew up with. So yeah, I think that she's totally changing and evolving right before our eyes into this more well-rounded woman, and kind of accepting the parts of herself that maybe were seen as bad in Mortasia. She's coming to accept them a little bit more. So yeah, I love that. I love that for her.
Yeah, I love that too. I think you really described her evolution very well, and the polarizing aspects of where she's come from and where she's going. I think that she does have the opportunity, I'm hoping, to really embrace her power. And I think tied to what you were saying, there's a part of growing up that is like learning that you do have power, and that the things that you are scared of about yourself or unsure about are part of your power. And so what will you do with that power? And so I'm hoping that she will finally take this opportunity to be free. I think That's what Rykaia brings into this story, both when it comes to Maevyth and Zevander, is this ability to show them that like it's okay to let go and not have a plan. And like you don't have to be so rigid and controlling in and of yourself. There's like a world here. And so I'm really hoping she is going to embrace her power and continue to evolve. We've seen a really beautiful development in this character. You see it in the language, you see it in the dialogue. There was a Reddit comment that I actually saw a couple weeks ago, someone commenting on the book, and they referenced Maevyth's personality changing overnight when she meets Zevander and comes into the second part of the book. And everyone has their own opinion, so like all good, but I disagree. And I got thinking about it. Like it kind of just stayed with me and made me kind of ponder it. And like she does change. I think that there's some validity there, but I think that we see the evolution where in other stories there isn't change or we don't get to see it. And we don't get to see how characters bring out differences in someone's personality and how different events change how they choose to act. Like when Maevyth comes into Eidolon's keep, she really has nothing to lose. And I think that we see those parts of her show up in her ability to like throw soup in Zevander's face. And she's really at a point where she thinks, if you're not going to let me leave and go find my sister, then I don't care to live. And so I just want to acknowledge that evolution of her character and us actually having the opportunity to experience it, because that's to me the testament of a good author, is to bring us on a journey and to almost have to check ourselves of like, I feel like maybe it's different now. And if you go back, you get the trail of the evolution bit by bit.
I love that. And you're right. I think the book contains multitudes of, like, just as a human being, like, I'm going to be different on some days or throughout the stages of my life. I'm going to change. I'm going to evolve. I'm certainly not the same person that I was last year. And I've gone through maybe like a fragment of what poor Maevyth has in just 600 pages of a book, not even. And so I think you're right. I think Keri Lake has really brought multitudes and layers to these characters. Maevyth from the soup scene and like being in the dungeon to her time and Lady Rudane's room and laughing and jumping and breaking the rules with Rykaia. Like those are two totally different people. So yeah, her personality has changed quite a bit because she's gone from being in Mortasia, being in this like fight or flight mode, then realizing her sister is gone and she can't trust anyone around her, to then starting to build this credibility and trust with the people around her for the first time in her life. And seeing this way of living that completely shatters the conceptions that she had built up in Mortasia. So like, yeah, a person's gonna change. A person's gonna change.
So there, take that, whoever you are. Okay. So Dolian's revelation that Maevyth is Zevander's mate introduces an emotional conflict into the story, forcing Zevander to face the reality of his feelings and the importance of Maevyth head on. So how does this development reshape your perception of Zevander and his motivations? And what does this mean for Maevyth, who remains unaware of its implications? Maevyth doesn't actually know that they're mates. That's the key difference at this point in the story. Zevander does, but she does not.
I wonder if he's not going to tell her.
Not again.
I
Not
know.
again.
It just came to my mind because I'm thinking of Zevander and how he's so like stoic and doesn't really divulge a lot of information. Like I wouldn't say, yeah, I would call him a little bit withdrawn from her in some ways. Just the way that he acts, he might not want to put that burden on her just yet. And so I'd love to see if this like will they, won't they starts to happen again. Hopefully there's an arc in this next part where they're safe and can kind of explore this new thing, this new mateship between them. Probably not. I mean, it remains to be seen with this possible pestilence coming.
You are so optimistic. I am just
know.
like, there's 90 pages. I feel like it's going to be absolute chaos from here to the end. And I think you're right. I don't think we're going to get their mate's conversation. I think he is going to hold it back. I think he's a very pragmatic man and he's got other things to worry about right now. But we do know that the fact that he knows and he just learned they're supposed to have a child is going to be in the back of his head driving his actions. And so it is interesting. Like, I mean, I have thought for many pages since they started talking about mates that if there are mates in this story, like Come on. So I'm not shocked. It doesn't really reshape my perception in a huge way, although we get very little warmth from Zevander. And when we get these moments of warmth, it's like you just want to hang on to them because you're so happy to see him letting go. And so I am like, the yearning has escalated. I am yearning for more Zevander love and for him to just like allow himself to dive into the swell of mateship and all the feelings that come with that. And I'm hoping we're going to get that version of him, which is his evolution, is Zevander, the responsibility of being a mate.
I kind of feel bad for Maevyth too, because again, she's either going to be told something that holds her captive. No offense to Zevander, I kind of love the fact that they're mates, but she hasn't had any agency throughout any of this. It's like, boom, you're
Right.
cursed. Then you get cast into the Eating Woods. Then you're thrown into a dungeon. Then you're saved by a scorpion man. Then you're thrown into another dungeon. Then you try to go have fun and you're taken away again, and now you're somebody's mate. Like, she's just being pushed and pulled in all of these directions. I'm like waiting for her to snap. Like, when is she gonna snap?
I think she's like so occupied with trying to save everyone else that she's not really bothered by it. And even in this moment, she has the sense that she might get to see her sister again. But she's also knowing that by leaving, she's kind of saving Dolian and Rykaia, so she can feel good about that. So I don't think she's been able to build up to that breaking point of like what she actually wants. I don't think she knows what she wants. But I think that's like a really good point about agency and the whole thing between them. I mean, I wouldn't have necessarily thought that Maevyth could be Zevander's mate if we were just looking at it very plainly from the beginning of the story. I don't think that she's going to be expecting that that's what's going on, but I don't know.
Remains to be seen.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Next episode, we will be focused on part 3. I cannot tell you how badly Sarah and I want to move on and read this part. It has been a long time coming, and we wanted to make sure that we did not continue reading while we were doing these episodes. I feel like it just helps us stay a little bit more authentic, keeps us on track, and it makes the theorizing a little bit more fun, also less hard to avoid spoilers. So super excited to see where the story ends, and we are scared about book 2. A lot could happen, but either way, we are so ready. Will Zevander be able to save Maevyth? And what condition will Maevyth be in when he finds her? And what might he have to sacrifice to get her back? You'll have to read on to the end of the book ahead of next episode. Join us back here. We will be talking about it all. Before we go, please, if you haven't already, read along. If you've made it this far and you haven't been reading along, that's weird. If you have a book that you want us to cover, a discussion point, anything you want to share, please send us an email. We will see you next time for part 3.